Here's a brief overview before we dive into the story. Sheymon, a talented young mage, dreams of a bright future with Katarina and proposes to her. However, his life takes a dark turn when the Elder of the Magic Tower steals his groundbreaking thesis and takes Katarina away, leading to her tragic death. Devastated by grief and consumed by rage, Sheymon resorts to forbidden black magic to escape imprisonment. He summons powerful golems to destroy the Magic Tower, vowing to reshape the world. Yet, his rebellion is brought to an end when he is slain by the hero. 500 years later, Sheymon is reincarnated as a descendant of that very hero. With a renewed determination, he vows once again to change the world. The manhwa starts with a man asking a woman named Katarina if she knows that Tillman Castle, the one we see off in the distance, has not fallen to any enemies ever once over the span of 200 years. We learn the man's name is Sheymon, and she asks what he's suddenly talking about, saying they need to get out of here. They're not supposed to be in this place to begin with. He tells her it's okay, as no one will be here right now, and she tries to tell him that she needs to go finish her cleaning duties. He says that it won't take too long, and he really wanted to show her the scenery from this place as it looks especially amazing at this time of day. She asks why it matters if it looks amazing, saying it's just the land of the nobles, which they can't live in. Sheymon then tells her that he might actually be able to buy a house there, as he's going to get promoted to an intermediate mage this time around. He wrote a thesis on a new golem, and his seniors really liked it. They said if the elder acknowledges it as well, then he'll likely promote him. While it won't be a big house, it should be big enough that the two of them can live comfortably in. We see her surprised by that, and then he asks her to marry him. He says that she suffered a lot for his sake this entire time, and starting now he'll make her the happiest person in the world. She then gets a bit playful and says that before he says anything like that, he should probably become an intermediate mage first. He calls her mean, and she laughs, saying that she's just kidding and that she wasn't expecting that such a day would come for them. As she starts to lean on his shoulder, Sheymon says that he thought they could truly be happy because he worked really hard for their happiness. But then the harsh reality kicks in as the elder actually took credit for his golem work. Another man says that the thesis he wrote will change the world. The elder is talking to a duke and says that's all too flattering, and this is all thanks to his unreserved investment. Sheymon's hearing all of his credit being stolen and starts to tune them out, but he's actually feeling anger, and he says that his beliefs were wrong. Even if he works hard for the rest of his life, he'll never truly be given credit, and he'll just keep rotting away. The duke then asks the elder what about the request he made, and the elder says he hasn't forgotten about that and asks the duke if he's really fine with her since she's just a woman of lowly birth. As some guards enter the room, Sheymon turns, seeing them bringing in Katarina forcefully into the room. We see they actually roughed her up a bit, and she's very scared. Sheymon's surprised as he didn't expect to see her here at all. He watches as they take her up to the duke, and Sheymon starts to lose it, saying he's tired of them walking all over. The duke said he heard she was pretty famous for her looks, and it's just as he expected. The elder says if she wasn't of lowly birth, she would have lived a vastly different life. Sheymon starts to get pissed, saying that everything he had lived desperately to protect is being taken, and he asks how they can live with themselves so carefree when they are constantly destroying those around them. As we see him preparing some kind of magic attack with tears in his eyes, he starts to run at the two of them, telling them that he will not let them take Katarina from him. The elder starts to get annoyed while releasing lightning magic, calling him a brat, asking if he really doesn't know his place, saying he's nothing but trash as he strikes him down with the lightning. Sheymon's glasses then break as he starts to fall over. Katarina starts to cry and scream, begging for him to get back up, and all he can do is stretch his hand out as she is being taken away from him. It goes black and then jumps to after some time skip as we see Sheymon on his knees, looking devastated inside of a prison cell. The only thing accompanying him are some rats, and his eyes look void of life. He says there was nothing he could do. He picks up one of the rats, causing it to start freaking out. We see he's even been marking his days in the cell as well. One of the guards then pokes him with a spear, and they laugh, saying it looks like he is trying to eat that mouse. They said they should just leave him be, as even a mage of the Magic Tower is worth nothing in this state. They even start mocking him, saying if he just helps them summon the golem, they would release him immediately. Of course, Sheymon doesn't reply, and they ask if he's even listening. The other one says he went completely crazy after the woman died. They decide to leave him alone and start discussing her death, informing us that Katarina committed suicide so she would protect her purity from the duke as she was sold off to him. They say it's a shame as she was too pretty to die, and Sheymon puts his thumb up to his mouth, biting his nail and pulling it off to the point where blood starts to spill out, and he apologizes to Katarina for letting such things happen to her. As the guards are walking back, they notice the mouse acting up, and they say it's as if they're waiting for something because they're all looking up in anticipation. The other guard immediately realizes something is off, and he gets the other guard to stab one of them. As soon as he does, we see a magic circle on one of the mouse's bellies. They now understand what's going on, and that this is bad because these are the mice from Sheymon's cage, who we see using his blood to start drawing something on the floor. He says he was just too weak to begin with, which he will change from now on. The guards quickly run over, telling him to stop what he's doing, and Sheymon says that he refuses to stop, as this is just the start. As his magic circle is now complete, he puts his palm on top of it, starting to absorb the life energy of the rats around him. Sheymon says if only he had been stronger from the start, he never would have lost Katarina. Each one of the rats in their respective circles starts sacrificing themselves as the aura pools in the middle. An explosion soon follows as Sheymon is now free from his prison cell. And we see he actually has a giant golem behind him now, which is what he based his thesis on that the Elder stole from him. Sheymon looks over at the guards, saying that was the same face that Katarina made, as we see them stricken with absolute fear looking up at the golem. Sheymon says that he tried thinking of reasons for him to still be alive, but now he understands what it is, as his golem swipes away at the guards, killing them, then explodes out of the wall. Sheymon says that it's all because he needs to take revenge on the world where the two of them couldn't live a happy life together. As now, he has even more golems wreaking havoc in the Mage Tower. As he's walking through the destruction, he tells Katarina there's no need to worry, as he won't be weak anymore. He'll obtain any power that he can get his hands on, regardless of what it costs. He will make sure that he changes everything. Bro has some serious crazy eyes. We then see the Elder's lightning magic, as he is currently in combat. As the shadow begins to loom over him, it is none other than Sheymon riding the golem he made in prison. The Elder asks if he's out of his mind, asking why he would dare use black magic. Since he's one who serves God, why would he side with the demons? Sheymon gives him a cold, icy stare, asking what any of that matters anymore. The Duke then also starts to run away, begging for him to spare him as he's someone who can make him the master of this place. And if he spares his life, he'll do anything he wants. Sheymon stretches his hand out, saying that he does not have the power he thinks he does, as he smites him down. He says that you can't bring back someone who's dead. He tells Katarina that this world that screwed them over will suffer his wrath all for the sake of her. Then it jumps sometime later to a man being knighted by the king, and we learn he is the hero named Loken. The king begs that he save the world from the darkness, as it has now been some time since Sheymon's rampage began, and he has been given the title of Demon King. He is trampling over all of their territories, slaughtering innocent lives, and he has already destroyed 2 kingdoms and 1 dukedom. The fate of the world all lies solely in the hands of Loken, the hero. So he pleads with him once more to eradicate the Demon King and save the world. As we see their banners high in the sky, Loken looks at his sword, raises it, and starts to give them a speech, saying, "Brave warriors of the divine Artania Empire. The brilliant light of their empire has lost its power, and the giant shadow the Demon King has cast is swelling up the Lodasia continent. However, they will not sit down, for the sake of their families and for the sake of the world. Today they will get rid of the Demon King and become the last hope that protects this world." We get a flashback of Katarina asking Sheymon if he heard the news, asking how it makes sense to cut off a child's hand just for stealing bread. Sheymon tries to tell her that she's speaking too loud and someone might overhear her. She says that the nobles can only give such harsh punishments so easily because they never have to worry about going hungry, asking why such a child needs to be punished so unreasonably just because of the social class he was born into. She has a sad look on her face, saying that even they weren't born in this position because they wanted to be either. Sheymon looks at her full of hope and says perhaps a day will come when social status no longer matters and they can all live equal and free. She says his name, saying that a day like that won't come just by waiting for it. He asks what she wants him to do, and she says they have to be the change they want to see in the world. Otherwise, the children they'll raise later will go through the same things. His books fall to the ground as he starts to get embarrassed, asking what she means about the children they'll raise, saying they haven't even gotten married yet. She says that wasn't the important part of the message, but says they're going to get married anyway. Sheymon starts to get really panicked and says that they will, but he's not ready yet. And she asks if he's going to or not. He says of course he will. She sighs and calls him terrible. She's back to being playful, saying that he's so shy and she's probably the only person who would even marry him. The flashback ends showing us his Demon King castle as he's standing before it. He calls out to Katarina, saying soon all of this will be over. It took a long time, but the world they wanted so badly will soon be a reality. As we see Locken's army in front of him, the soldiers all start to slowly advance their march, and we see them with expressions of dread. Locken then calls out to Sheymon, saying that the entire world has been filled with suffering, and he swears in the name of God and justice that all of his evil deeds shall be judged today. Sheymon chuckles at first, and then breaks into full-blown laughter that can be heard across the entire field. He asks if Locken really plans to judge him with God and justice, asking if he really thinks he would fear some false god and their hypocritical sense of justice to begin with. Locken tells him that he will make sure of it, as countless heroes of the Empire stand with him to bring judgment down upon him, and today they shall take down the demon and protect their world. As he leads in his troops, he yells charge, as they all start to fall in right behind him. As they start to get close to him, Sheymon asks who they are to judge him, saying that he is the one who shall be the judge. The day he lost Katarina, justice died. As he slams his staff into the ground, creating a magic circle beneath it, as if time is frozen for the soldiers charging at him. Sheymon says that he no longer believes in such illusions, and that he'll show them the one thing he does believe in. All of the soldiers lose control of their bodies, as we see their life force getting completely devoured by the power within Sheymon's ritual, the same way he summoned the golems before, pretty much deleting the soldiers. The golems then rise up from the energy of their corpses and let out a roar that causes Locken to put up his guard. Sheymon then smirks at him, telling him to look, saying this is the day true justice is born. And he tells Locken to cast away his deceptive faith, as today marks the beginning of a new era, one ruled by him, where he shall lay waste to all of the nobility in this world. As he has amassed an army of golems, one of them raises its fist into the air. We see it grab a fistful of soldiers, squeezing them into a human lemonade. The other soldiers, watching their comrades get squished, start to panic but realize there's no future if they back down here. Sheymon's eyes look a little bit sad, and he calls them fools, saying they're nothing but garbage. They have nothing more than their social status to cling to if they're trying to resist real power. But he does not plan to spare them, as he will make sure they are all eradicated. From this moment on, we see Locken readying himself to dash in, calling out to Sheymon, saying that he's unforgivable. A yellow aura imbues his blade as he leaps through the air, slicing through one of the golems and instantly destroying it. Sheymon is surprised that he took it out with a single strike and says this must be the reason that he couldn't take down the Livia kingdom, no matter how many golems he sent. It must have all been because of Locken. Sheymon looks at him with disgusted eyes, but Locken's look like he's only doing what needs to be done. Sheymon declares that he will make sure Locken dies today, and an all-out war ensues between Sheymon and Locken, with their respective soldiers being golems and humans. The battlefield then grows eerily quiet as broken weapons litter the ground and blood stains the earth. Now, only Sheymon and one of his golems remain, while Locken, completely gassed out, props himself up against his sword. Locken looks up at Sheymon, saying he's going to put an end to this. Behind Sheymon, the golem begins to crumble and fall apart. Sheymon calls out to Locken as Locken raises his blade. Sheymon tells him that he does not understand how rotten the world is and, through tears and a glare full of regret, says that if it weren't for him, he would have started everything anew after cleansing the world. Sheymon curses Locken and declares that his entire bloodline will spend their lives in suffering. As his tears slowly turn into tears of blood, Locken tightens his grip on his blade and swings it one final time, channeling all his remaining aura. The swing cuts off Sheymon's head and obliterates the remaining pieces of the golem behind him. As Sheymon's head floats through the air, he recalls Katarina. He remembers her saying that when he smiles like this and is with her, all her worries wash away. She tells him these are the moments she's at her absolute happiest as she stands on her tiptoes, holding his face, kissing him, and saying she loves him. These are the moments Sheymon thinks of in death. But suddenly, he jolts awake, immediately clutching his throat and asking if it was all a dream. Feeling his head still attached to his neck, he wipes sweat from his brow with his forearm, muttering about a crazy headache. He notices no wounds on his hand and wonders what is going on. As he takes in his unfamiliar surroundings, he speculates he might be in a foreign country. He questions how he's alive, dismissing the idea of black magic, since even that couldn't bring someone back to life, something he would have done already if it were possible. His shock deepens when he sees a familiar knight's portrait on the wall. It's none other than Locken. Sheymon demands to know why the portrait is there. At that moment, a butler enters, addressing Sheymon as young lord, and expressing relief that he's finally awake. The butler hugs him, saying he thought they had lost the last of Locken's bloodline since Sheymon didn't wake for 2 weeks. Sheymon, confused, asks what he means by young lord and who the butler is. The butler, panicking, asks if Sheymon truly doesn't recognize him and falls to his knees, blaming himself for not taking better care of him. He tearfully explains that Sheymon might be experiencing temporary memory loss due to the accident and begins to recount basic information to jog his memory. The butler tells him that he is Luke D. Lochin, the successor to the Lochin Viscounty of the Baroque Empire and a descendant of the great hero Lochin. Sheymon, shocked, mutters that this means he died 500 years ago and is now his enemy's descendant, living almost half a millennium after his death. Sweating nervously, Sheymon bolts from the room, ignoring the butler's protest that he shouldn't be moving around in his condition. Sheymon mutters that it doesn't make sense, slamming open the door and stepping out onto a balcony. He yells in disbelief, but what he sees stuns him, a giant, towering golem-like machine clad in intricate armor. Sheymon stumbles, asking if it's real, realizing that if this exists, then everything the butler said is true. Looking at how intricate it is, he can tell that the weapon is far more advanced than golem magic. Magic that he could have only imagined is now standing before him. The butler calls out to him, and Sheymon asks what his name is. Sheymon finds it hard to believe that a person goes into it, and Han says that is truly the case. Sheymon starts to think about it, saying that it requires a lot of advanced technology for someone to pilot it. But if Hans is telling him the truth, it is truly an amazing weapon, which means you're safe from external threats in battle and can even react quicker to events when compared to golems that you control from afar. It addresses all the problems he had with the golems in the past. Hans, surprised by Sheemon's interest, watches as Sheymon retreats to his room, deep in thought. Sheymon mutters to himself that if this is all true, then 500 years have truly passed. He wonders why he had to be reborn as the descendant of his greatest enemy. The next day, we see the gigant is still outside the house. The scene shifts to Sheymon's room upstairs, where he puts another book down. He's once again chugging alcohol, muttering that there's no way he's going to be able to find his followers. Putting his lack of followers aside, Sheymon laments how people have almost forgotten about him entirely. He says it's too much. Even after 500 years, there's not even a trace of his existence. On top of that, his body has no mana or stamina. He asks himself what he can even do with such a body. As he begins to walk, he twists his ankle and falls face first to the ground. In frustration, he asks what he's even meant to do. Clenching his fist in regret, he calls out to Katarina, asking if he's doomed to achieve nothing in this life. He only ever wanted to create a world where everyone was equal in content. Suddenly, Sheymon hears a man yelling for the young master, which surprises him. He sees the door open and wonders what's going on with all the noise. Heading outside to the balcony, he hears a man demanding how long the young master is going to avoid them. The man informs Hans and everyone else gathered that he and the other merchants won't back down until they've had an audience with the young master. The man introduces himself as Darren, the branch master of the Alon Merchant Association. Sheymon laughs to himself, remarking that Locken's descendants sure have it rough. Darren tells him that it's about the 30,000 pesos Sheymon borrowed last year to develop a mine and has since avoided repaying. Darren asks if Sheymon ever intended to repay it, exclaiming that he can't live like this anymore. Hans tries to intervene, saying the young master needs rest due to his condition, and they'll figure out how to repay the debt another way. Darren refuses, insisting that the young master must address the matter himself. The situation grows tense as Darren observes Hans and the others' anxious expressions. He concludes that Sheymon likely can't repay the debt right now. However, Darren offers a solution. Why not hand over the gigant in their house instead? He claims it's probably not even worth 30,000 pesos since it's secondhand, so he's giving them a great deal. One of the men present yells, saying that's impossible. They only have 3 gigants in the entire household, which are essential for defending their territory. The Knight Commander, Rogers, speaks up, declaring that he won't allow it. He says they'll have to kill him before taking the gigant because it's crucial to their defense. Hans urges Rogers to relax, and the accountant, Dixon, suggests they temporarily raise taxes instead. Hans sighs, asking if Dixon knows how dire the people's situation is, as they can't afford to take what little they have left. Dixon insists the only solution is to hand over the gigant. Rogers yells again, repeating that it's impossible. Sheymon starts to laugh, saying, "This is such a good household. Locken would be rolling in his grave." Darren tells everybody to relax, saying he wants to seize that gigant in the manor, but he doesn't want people to think of him as the type who takes from the great hero's house. He starts to point towards the gigant, asking if he can just leave with it. Rogers asks if he's joking, saying, "I already told you." But Darren says he's probably misunderstanding him, as he's not talking about the gigant, but rather the magic tower directly behind it. They're all surprised by this, and Rogers says the magic tower is a better choice than the gigant. Even Hans says, nobody goes there anymore. Dixon says they had some income from it as a tourist attraction before, but now it's useless. Sheymon asks what he means as he starts to look over at it. He completely recognizes it as his magic tower and can't believe that Locken built his house right where he killed him. Sheymon says that 500 years ago, where the tower is currently situated, is where he used to live with Katarina. It was an old and worn-down house, but it was still theirs. In the end, it was where he made a lot of good memories. To them, it was a cozy resting place where they had dreams together. We hear Darren saying that the land around the Demon Tower has crossed into the territory of his company, but Sheymon is just pissed, asking, how dare they go after that place? Darren continues, telling them not to worry, saying that with his company's diverse capabilities, they'll be able to make it into a popular tourist spot, which will also greatly enhance the economy of this region. He starts laughing. Dixon asks where to sign, but both Hans and Rogers seem skeptical. Then the door slams open, startling all 3 of them, as Sheymon starts to walk out, hella pissed. Hans asks if it's okay for him to walk, and Sheymon glares at him, telling him to step aside. Darren then says it was hard to meet him, asking if he's already recovered, and says his company will oversee the management of the Demon Tower. Sheymon asks if he only knows how to yap, and if he even knows what kind of place it is that he's trying to get. We see he's completely pissed. He continues glaring at Darren, asking, how dare you try to take control of what I own? Darren and his men start to get a little anxious, wondering why he's so fierce, as he's way too different from what they've heard. Darren goes to explain himself, but Sheymon calls him a con man, telling him to shut up, saying that after taking the land that stands at the center of his territory, not far from the main estate. He intends to expand his influence and authority under the guise of developing the area. We see Darren is physically surprised by this, and Sheymon asks if he got it wrong. Darren immediately panics and tries to cover it up, saying that's too far-fetched. But Sheymon calls him pathetic, saying that they can't even sell secondhand weapons, and he's even trying to take over their territory. He says, in terms of incompetent people, I hate guys like you who are completely evil on the inside. Darren says he can't let him have the upper hand here, and in times like this, he needs to give an even stronger response. He yells, saying that the Locken household is unable to repay its debt, and that's why he was trying to be considerate of him and came up with a proposition. His company has to get its money back somehow, asking if he's wrong. Sheymon asks him why he thinks they aren't going to repay their debt, saying that he'll do it in 10 days, and they'll repay everything, including the interest. Then he yells, telling him to get the hell out of his sight, while releasing some serious killing intent towards Darren and his men, leaving them stun-locked by it. One of them hiccups out of fear, and Darren and his crew get on their wagon and leave. Darren tells him that he can't wait for him to try to put his money where his mouth is. Sheymon says, these dudes all act the same, and Rogers is just surprised he's standing. Rogers calls out to him, saying he can't believe what he just said to him. Sheymon asks what's wrong, and Dixon, Hans, and Rogers all instantly salute him, saying they are so touched by his statement, and we see them crying. Hans says that he's so insightful that he saw through their plans immediately. Roger says seeing him get angry to protect his ancestors and their honor was amazing. Sheymon just asks what they're talking about, and Roger says he didn't realize he took such pride in the household. He saw how that merchant bastard couldn't do a thing because of his fierce response, and at the time, he saw the image of the hero Locken within him. Sheymon just retorts that they're comparing him to Locken, saying, I'm definitely going to turn into the Demon King again at this rate. Hans then says he has a question, asking how he intends to repay the debts. Sheymon says, that depends on how much 30,000 peso is truly worth. Hans says, you can buy 10,000 sacks of wheat with that money, and it costs as much as a single unit of the new warrior class gigant. Right now, we don't have enough collateral to borrow money from a bank or other measures. Hans asks him if he has a solution. Sheymon says, that doesn't really help me, and if that's all you have to say, then stand aside. I'll repay the debt in my own way, and you can just sit back and relax. Sheymon starts to go through the house, looking at the assets, seeing them empty, seeing that the house is falling apart, and their food situation is really bad. Back in his office, Sheymon throws some papers into the air, asking, is this not the same household that killed the Demon King? And if that's the case, why the hell is there nothing here? He asks Hans if he stole it all with the others. Hans says no. Why would I even think of such a thing? You'll understand if you look at the genealogy. Sheymon asks why he would need to see something like that, and Hans explains that after Hero Locken killed the Demon King, he was bestowed the title of a Marquis and built his territory within the south of the Lydia Kingdom. Sheymon tells him to get to the point. Duke Baroque incited a rebellion against the Livia Kingdom, and Viscount Locken fought him because he couldn't stand the injustice being committed. However, the Viscount, who had been under the curse of the Demon King, suffered a crushing defeat. After that, his title was revoked, and he was exiled to the borders, where he passed away due to the rapid deterioration of his health. Sheymon says that makes it seem like Locken didn't want to live by his tower, and he was forced here. Sheymon says besides all of this, the financial situation is so bad, asking how it's been sustained for 500 years. Hans looks worried, saying that there's a reason for that. It's because his ancestors hoped for them to regain their former glory. Sheymon asks what he means, and Hans tells him for the sake of making a comeback, his ancestors would do anything, even if it meant using all the assets, authority, and everything they possessed. They wanted to recover the reputation of this household, but due to the generational curse passed on through its members, no matter how hard they worked, their efforts were ultimately in vain. This was how the household, once home to the hero who saved the world, met its downfall. He's not sure if Sheymon remembers this, but the reason he lost consciousness for more than half a month was due to a gigant incident. He was working tirelessly to restore the household's reputation, and he wanted to prove that he had the qualities of a hero and pushed himself too hard. Sheymon starts to think about it, and then sits up out of his chair, walking over to the window. Hans tells him that they are stuck, and even as a member of the household, he can't help him with anything and is truly sorry for that. Sheymon then gets an idea, but Hans tells him that he's sure there's something they can do because, even if he has to give up his life, he'll find a way to accumulate the amount to pay back the loan. Sheymon tells him there's no need for that, as he just thought of an idea. They just need to pay the money back regardless of how it's obtained. Then it jumps to a woman screaming, and Hans and everybody else in the mansion are completely taken aback. Rogers is even crying, asking how this could be. Hans looks completely panicked, saying who would have expected him to take the statue of Hero Locken and sell it off. Hans says the statue was here yesterday and wonders where it could have gone overnight, but then starts to wonder where the young lord is, saying he needs to tell him first. One of the guards quickly runs over, telling him that there's been a problem. Hans says if it's about the statue, that's not what he cares about, and he asks where the young lord is. The guard says that he left when the security was at its most vulnerable, and Hans falls to his knees, wondering just what the hell Luke is cooking up. We see him on a carriage, taking the statue of Locken. The carriage man then calls out to him, saying if it's not too rude, he wants to ask a question. Sheymon says sure, but asks the dude who he is. The dude laughs awkwardly, wondering if he forgot him. We are introduced to Philip, his guard knight. He asks him if he really plans on selling the statue. Sheymon says yeah, and it should sell for quite a bit if he melts it down. Philip says that it might be important to him, but there is 500 years of history tied to the statue. Sheymon puts his foot up on the carriage, asking him if 5 centuries worth of history is going to feed him. Philip says that he won't be able to pay off his debts just from selling the statue. Sheymon tells him that it's just a small part of the plan. Philip says it's good that he has one, and he's sure everyone will understand as long as he repays the debts. He asks what his plan is. Sheymon thinks about it, saying that he's going to use the money from selling the statue to gamble it all away to get the money. Philip freezes up and stops the carriage, saying he thought he had a plan, and this just sounds like a damn accident. Sheymon calls him annoying, asking why he came with him if he's only going to lecture him. Philip says he's the one who dragged him out at the crack of dawn, and had he known this was his plan, he never would have left. He suggests that they turn back, beg for forgiveness, and come up with a better plan. Sheymon calls him an idiot, and Philip asks what he means. Sheymon tells him to think it through. If they turn back now, he would have to explain why he left with the great predecessor statue, and if his reason is that he wants to gamble, they would never forgive him. He's sure he'd be expelled from the household if he returned. This is a big shock to Philip, and Sheymon says that he guesses they won't be able to do that since he is still the young lord. It would rather only be Philip to get kicked out of the house instead. He laughs, telling Philip to choose wisely and make sure to pick the better option for him, asking if he wants to become a vagrant without any money or if he wants to become a hero that will bring honor to the household. Once more, he tells Philip to choose wisely. Philip looks nervous, debating it, and reluctantly agrees, saying he'll just keep going the way they are. Sheymon says that it's a good choice. Philip says that if he heard that his personality changed after waking up from his coma, he is now basically the devil himself. They finally make it to a port city, as there are 5 minutes until the ship departs. The captain calls for the final onboarding process, and Philip asks if they are really getting on this. Sheymon asks if he still wants to turn around, and Philip immediately tries to guide him on. When they step foot on the ship, it's time to go as the captain rings the bell, telling everybody it's time to depart. The ship is finally setting sail on the seas. Sometime later at night, they arrive at a city named Lamer. They pull up to the port. A bag of money then gets dropped into Philip's hand, and he starts barking at the guy, asking him if this is really all he's going to pay. Sheymon tells him to go ahead and guide the way, and Philip tries to tell him they could have gotten more. Sheymon says it's good enough, and the area they're entering is changed. Philip asks if he's been here before, and Sheymon says it's only for a little bit, although it wasn't like this back then. As back when he remembers coming here, it was basically a deserted island because there was a kraken constantly blocking the seas. He sighs, saying it really has been 500 years. He decides to stop being gloomy and says it was a good idea to come here. Philip seems more excited now, saying he doesn't know why he came here, but it'll definitely be better than what he remembers. This place is the second biggest city in the southern region of the empire. Things are constantly changing. It used to be an island where people couldn't reach easily because of sea monsters, but with the development of magic engineering, the place has slowly become a lot more populated. So naturally, the gambling scene is really big. He asks Sheymon if he's sure he'll be okay. Sheymon tells him if he wasn't confident, he never would have bothered coming in the first place. As we see them in front of the casino, he tells Philip it's time to head inside, but Philip says to wait as he needs to get ready. Sheymon asks what's the big deal, and Philip asks how he's so calm and if he knows how to guarantee a win in these games. Sheymon says he guesses so because when it comes to gambling, your attitude is everything. We then hear a man saying that's not good, and it looks like he's won, as Sheymon is currently losing all of his bets. He's asked if he wants to continue, and Sheymon laughs nervously, wondering if this is how it's really going to go. The man who keeps winning says that luck is smiling at him. Sheymon tells him that luck is also an ability. The man laughs, saying that he sure is generous and that it's an honor to be able to play a game with such a cool young lord. However, it seems like he's out of money, asking if they should just end the game here. Sheymon says they can't do that and tells Philip to exchange all of the remaining money into coins. Philip says that they can't because if he loses this too, they'll be broke. Sheymon tells him not to hold back and to bring it. The man on the other end of the table says that he's agitated and sure was lucky today. Sheymon puts all of his coins up, saying he'll wager everything and go all in on this next bet. Philip cries, saying the family is doomed. The man on the other end of the table asks if he's serious, saying he's nervous because it's his first time having such a good game, but he must be fine with it. Sheymon says that being anxious about it doesn't change their results. The other man says that's impressive, asking if they should confirm each other's cards. We see him communicating with the woman behind Sheymon. The man then turns his hand around, saying the goddess of luck is definitely on his side, and starts to take all of Sheemon's money. But Sheymon tells him to wait, saying he needs to check his cards too. As he flips over his cards, he says surprisingly enough, this is what he has. The man looks confused, asking how this is possible. Sheymon says that sudden reversals are the joy of gambling, and it was such an enjoyable match. As he shakes his hand out for the other man to shake, Philip starts to cry, saying he always believed in him. The man on the other end of the table slams his fist down, saying there's no way, asking how he got those cards and what tricks he played. Sheymon asks what he's talking about, and says maybe he's talking about the people behind him and how they were informing him of his cards. The man sweats nervously, wondering how he knew. Sheymon asks if there was any way he wasn't meant to. All of the spectators nearby are his subordinates, and he knew they were secretly passing over cards. But the reason he kept falling for it was because he needed to touch every single one of the cards. He left small marks of mana on them. And if he can control the cards with the marks, then for him, who used to manage a golem army, managing cards is like a walk in the park. He can easily win all these matches even without fancy tricks. Sheymon laughs, telling the man to hurry up and acknowledge his loss. He says he thinks that today's business ends now and that everybody in the casino needs to show this young man some etiquette education. As they all start to brandish weapons, Sheymon asks why all these bastards are the same even after 500 years. And while he doesn't have the same amount of mana as before, he has no issue with facing small fry like this. He starts to imbue energy into his hand, telling them to get started already. As they all start to leap at him, Philip tells Sheymon to duck as he quickly unsheathes his blade, breaking some of the enemy's weapons and sending them flying away. He asks how dare they draw a sword towards the sole heir of the Locken family, and says now they must understand that means they are putting their entire lives on the line. The man looks terrified and says that he has committed a sin worthy of death. Philip tells him to shut up, asking how he dares to try to harm the young lord. Sheymon then realizes something, saying this isn't quite that bad. It then jumps to later as Philip is carrying a bag of money, saying that this is quite heavy and definitely more than 10,000 pesos. Sheymon says obviously, and he looks back at Philip, saying he just thought of him as a porter, but he is way more talented than he expected. Regardless, today's earnings weren't bad, but it will be hard to use gambling houses after causing this chaos. He asks Philip if there is anywhere else to make money, and Philip thinks about it, saying that they could go to the gigant arena. Sheymon asks what that is, and Philip says just like how there are arenas where humans used to fight each other, now there are arenas where gigants fight one another. Depending on the match, the dividend rate differs, but if he does well, he can earn 30,000 or even more. Sheymon says that he was interested in the gigants, and if they are developed using golem magic, it might be helpful in guessing who will win. Philip tells him just to believe in him, as he was once a top student at the Imperial Military Gigant Academy. Sheymon tells him to go ahead and lead the way, and Philip happily runs, saying that he should give him more credit. As they're walking towards the arena, they hear some guards shit-talking some people while kicking them. It's a whole group of children being stomped on by the guards, asking if they will only listen after they die. Philip asks how they could do something to someone so young, but Sheymon is having different thoughts. He says even after 500 years, while the world has changed, there are still some things that haven't. Some things decay and rot even more as time passes. He starts to grit his teeth out of anger and then calls out to the guards, telling them to stop. But someone else beats him to it, saying to stop immediately. When the guards turn, asking who it is, a woman approaches, saying they are the royal guard. She asks if they are not meant to protect the subjects and why they are wielding violence against young children. She continues talking, but Sheymon is experiencing a whole different set of emotions as they swirl up inside of him when he looks at her. It looks like none other than Katarina. She says the children have the right to be protected too, and he wonders if maybe she was reincarnated as well. The guards say that even if she may be a princess, there's no point resisting what they are doing, as the Count himself has issued the order. Surely she knows how restless the people have become as a result of all their refugees. The princess asks if they really believe that locking people up like cattle in an environment not suitable to live in is right. They are innocent children who have lost their nation and their family, and if they were guilty, she shall be the first to be punished instead. Because she is the princess of the Volga kingdom, that means she is one of the refugees seeking shelter here. The guards say that if she continues to do it, it will be nothing but trouble. They are not doing this because they want to either, but because they were ordered to. Philip says the situation is getting serious, asking Sheymon if this is okay. Sheymon asks if he knows who that is, and Philip says of course, that she is quite famous in the Volga kingdom as the princess who cares little to nothing about nobles' gazes. He doesn't know why, but he's heard their kingdom fell to ruin, and he never thought he would see a princess like this. We learn her name is Reina. Sheymon is just still completely dumbfounded. No matter how he looks at her, that is definitely Katerina, and he wonders how she looks the same even if she did reincarnate. The guards call out to Reina, saying that they apologize, but they cannot allow her to do this. As they grab onto her arms, she asks what he is doing, and he raises his arm, pushing her away with his hand, causing her to fall. Something snaps inside Sheymon, and he immediately leaps at the guard, telling him to get his filthy hands off her. We see his knuckles are bruised, and he says even if time passes and the world changes, people need to be taught a damn lesson every single day. As he is mercilessly beating this man, he says these pieces of filth will only learn with pure violence, and no matter what he does, they will always remain, which bothers him a lot. Reina then grabs onto his arm, begging him to stop. She says there is no need to go this far. He goes to call her Katerina but stops. One of the guards asks how dare he attack one of them as he draws his weapon. The guard says it seems he does not fear the imperial law. Philip asks him if that law of his is more important than his life, as we see his blade to the man's throat. The dude starts to choke up, then grabs his friend, running away, saying he will make them regret this. Philip clicks his tongue, saying this is straight out of a Chinese manhwa, and he's surprised they didn't say he was courting death. Sheymon then calls out to Reina but calls her Katerina instead and asks if she is hurt, saying he is sorry he lost his mind for a second and he should have helped her. She says she is sorry but asks him who he is, and he is confused. He asks her what she means. She is obviously a little scared by his actions, and he says he might look different, so she won't recognize him, and he will tell her everything now. She says it will not be necessary, asking what the difference is between him and the guards when they both resort to violence. He tries to explain himself, but she says more importantly, he seems to be mistaking her for someone else as her name is not Katerina. It is Reina, as he must have heard the guard say. Philip says that it seems the young lord made a mistake, and they are not really suspicious people as he starts to yap to her. Sheymon is lost in thought, looking at his hands, and his eyes start to become full of sorrow. He says he endured countless hours alone, even though he knew she would never come back, and yet he almost fell apart just because they look very similar. We then hear an older man asking Reina what she is doing here. He says he told her that there was something important scheduled today, asking if she knows how hard it was for him to find her. This is her butler Victor. She goes to explain it to him, but Victor gets pissed, saying she better not have been fighting the guards again. Then Victor sees Sheymon, asking who they are, and he tells him that even if it's not their first time meeting, he apologizes. But due to various situations, things are quite tense, so it would be great if they didn't get too close to the princess. Sheymon says that's stupid, saying even though he did misunderstand the situation and escalated, he helped them out in the end. He didn't do it to expect anything in return, but at least she could say thank you. We see Reina thinking about it, but Sheymon turns, telling Philip it's time to go, and both she and Victor watch them leave, saying they should go as well. Reina says he's right, as she didn't actually thank him. Then we are taken to the gigant arena, which doesn't look big enough to hold those giant guys, but we'll see. The shoutcasters say the match is getting really intense while we see Philip and Sheymon in the crowd. They make their way to their seats, and Sheymon says the fight is over as we see one of the gigants falling over due to a strike. As it topples down, the crowd starts cheering, saying that Adolf wins. Philip can't believe that he got it right again, saying at this rate they'll pay off all of their debt and strike it rich. Sheymon says this is very easy, and he guesses it's because gigants are made based on golem magic, and he can easily determine the victor because he can see their flow of mana. The shoutcasters say the next match is probably going to be a bloodbath, as it's a gigant named Savage versus one named Sting. Philip says he can probably predict this next one as well, asking how Sting, who has 1 win and 5 losses, could possibly win against Savage, who's at 28 wins and 2 losses. Sheymon says although it's possible to win despite such a disadvantage in strength, it seems this match will be trivial. The shoutcasters then start introducing the fighters as we see one of them with their axes crossed, and we are introduced to the dual axe-wielding savage being piloted by a man named Brian. Sheymon is surprised by this one, as when it walks out, it is called the Lucky Gigant. The shoutcasters say it was given a miracle win last time. Philip says it's quite a pity that he got a lucky win because now he's facing Savage. We are introduced to Sting, and the pilot is named Karen. Sheymon seems interested, saying he needs to go all in on Sting. Philip asks why, saying Savage is guaranteed to win this match. What Sheemon's eyes say is a different story because he can see the aura, and he can tell that Sting is much more capable than they've let everybody else believe. Savage's axe starts to fly through the air as we see Sting block it. The shoutcasters wonder what's going on, seeing that Sting is putting on an unexpected performance. Everybody's expectations of a painful defeat are low-key being blown out of the water as Sting blocks every one of Savage's attacks. Savage laughs, saying he thought they were just an amateur, but it seems like they've got some skills. However, it's still far from enough, as he comes in with a devastating blow that sends one of Sting's arms flying. The spectators are surprised, even Philip, who says there's no way this happened. But Sheymon is confused. Sting has the upper hand in terms of mana flow, yet they're not using their mana at all. Savage starts to laugh, telling Sting to get up as their legs are still attached, and if they don't plan to fight anymore, all he can do is offer them an easy way out. As he raises his axe into the air, Philip starts to panic, asking what they're going to do as all their money is about to be lost. Everyone watches as Savage's axe comes in directly towards Sting. Sting's eyes start to light up as they finally use their mana, but maybe it's too late. Savage's axe comes straight into the ground, shattering it. But then we see there's actually nothing underneath. Sting asks if he's aware that you can adjust your bet in Gigant matches up until 30 seconds into the match. And now that the time frame has passed, they can't afford to pay for any more repairs than this. Sting sticks their hand out as a magic circle forms and uses an ability called Fire Blast, a straight-up flamethrower on Savage, lighting him ablaze. The shoutcasters wonder how this could be, saying they have an unprecedented event happening here. Their champion, who bested the odds of 20-1 with pure skill, has now been crowned as Savage's Gigant falls to the ground. Philip starts to scream, saying that he believed in them the entire time. But Sheymon is just surprised that they actually used magic, saying there's no way this should be possible. Philip asks what he's so confused about, saying Sting's rider Karen must have just been a rune knight. It's not too common to see Gigants using magic, but they must have been hiding their strength to raise the odds. Sheymon says that's not what's important. The fundamental theory behind using magic through weaponry is something he developed, and that method, no matter how much time has passed, cannot be replicated by others. That's all because it's a process he completed with the use of black magic. We are taken to the hangar for the Gigant. Philip asks what they're doing there, saying they need to head back as soon as they can, but Sheymon tells him to shut up, saying that he's busy thinking and Philip's not helping at all. We then hear Victor telling Reina that she can still change her mind, asking how she's going to go into a match with a Gigant like this. He says this isn't even a fight she should have accepted in the first place. Reina says that a mercenary like Andre would have no trouble riding Mir to fight the Count's Gigant. Both Philip and Sheymon wonder what exactly is going on. Victor continues, asking why she would agree to such a rash duel, saying that she'll need to marry the Count if she loses. This is not a decision you can take lightly, he says. She replies that she made her choice carefully. If she didn't accept, countless refugees would starve to death. In order to save everybody, this is the only way. Victor asks how sacrificing her future can be a viable option, especially because her Gigant is falling apart. It's obvious that you're going to lose, he says, yet you want to protect the refugees so much you're neglecting your own life. Why do you have no will to protect yourself? Sheymon tells Philip they should go, saying he's finished here in the hangar and they should just head out. As he's walking, we see her Gigant in the background. He says she's definitely not Katarina, and I don't need to get involved. We then hear a man saying that the princess is just selling herself off, causing Sheymon to stop in his tracks. The man continues, saying the Count is a man who stops at nothing to get what he wants and has threatened the refugees many times before. Without her, the refugees will truly be helpless. The man explains that if she isn't completely changing the Mana Stone, the Gigant won't even be operable. Even if it were, the difference in specs compared to Count Manak's Gigant will be too large to put up a good fight. He tells her she should just listen to her butler. Reina says she's aware of that, but she can't give up. If I lose without trying, she says, starting to shake and cry. Who else will stand up for the weak? Sheymon walks back over, asking if he could take a look. Reina turns, surprised, and Sheymon says that the mana stone inside of this gigant can definitely still be used. Victor draws a sword out of nowhere, telling Reina to stay behind him. He says, "This is too convenient to be coincidental, and they could be assassins sent by Count Monike." Sheymon starts to get pissed, asking why this old dude is getting on his nerves, but Philip laughs, telling him to put away the sword. He introduces Sheymon as Luke D. Locken, the 15th descendant of the Locken family and the current lord. Victor asks how he's meant to trust such words, and Reina just tells him to stand down. She starts to walk towards Sheymon and says she wants to apologize for their meeting before. It seems he's overheard her situation, and she's embarrassed to admit it, but they have no other way. She'd like to ask him to help her. Rather, she begs him. Sheymon says, "All right," as we see him holding on to a tiny dagger. He says to ensure he is not mistaken this time, he'll make sure to show off his skills. As he starts to walk toward the pilot area on the gigant, the engineer sighs, saying that gigant repairs can't be done by just anyone. His partner says there's a reason they are called Iron Mages, and that Sheemon's just going to damage the gigant further. I can't believe that Mir is subjected to such a fate because some noble has a big ego. Philip gets close to both of them, asking if they would like to make a bet with him. He bets 10,000 pesos that his young lord can easily fix the gigant that these two were unable to. They ask why they would even take an offer like that, and Philip laughs, saying it just means they're scared. The engineer says they'd better double the stakes because he's in. Reina then asks Philip a question, and he panics since he's talking to a woman. She asks if a tool like that is typically used to fix a gigant, as they've noticed that Sheymon is holding onto a dagger. Philip starts to sweat nervously. Sheymon then swings, only hitting his hand, when blood starts to fly. Philip is confused and starts to scream out in panic, but Sheymon sighs, telling him to just keep watching. His blood starts to pour on the mech. Philip wonders if he just watched his own young lord off himself in front of all these people. But little by little, magic circles start to form all over the perimeter of Mir, as if they were bending to Sheemon's will. Everything starts to coalesce into the middle of the engine-like structure, getting it running. Soon, a red aura starts to swirl around Mir. Sheymon stretches his hand out and screams, telling the gigant to arise, as we see the magic circle that he has made completely repair it using his own blood. We get a flashback to one night at the Demon King's castle, and we see Sheymon tired as there are golem corpses all around him. He stops moving as we see him standing before one, and he asks if it's really planning to fall in such a place like this. Saying that it is an immortal being who is meant to lead his enemies to hell, he starts to release his aura, telling it to answer his summons once more. The golem's body begins to regenerate itself by taking from the other fallen golems around him. This one looks like it's juiced up quite a bit as it lets out a roar. The flashback ends with Mir opening its eyes as the gigant is now ready to be piloted. Philip says, "As expected of the young lord, I believed in him from the very beginning." Both of the engineers fall to the floor saying, "This is not possible." Even Reina and Victor are surprised, asking how he could do such a thing. One of them says that they can't believe he was able to revive a dead magic crystal, and they've never heard of the existence of such a mage in their life. They claim the continent, rather, the entire world, would be amazed at this historic event. Philip, all happy, walks up to Sheymon, saying there really isn't anything his young lord can't do, and he'd believe him even if he said he could make a golem out of rocks. Little does he know he can. One of the engineers says that's impossible, and it must be some kind of trick. Drawing a magic circle with blood and activating it sounds a lot like black magic. Philip starts to get pissed, asking how they dare claim that the sole heir of Locken is using black magic. The engineer says that no matter how he looks at it, that's the only possibility. Sheymon says that it's fine, as he'll explain the truth to them. Then he activates his porn-level acting, saying that it's a top-secret technique passed down by his family, which has been kept hidden for nearly 500 years. The engineers wonder what kind of swordsman family would have such a secret technique, but Reina tells them that's not what's important. Even if it were black magic, he has just saved countless lives, and I don't know how I could ever repay him for this. She'd like to apologize again for what happened last time. He tells her it's fine, and it's no surprise that she misunderstood. She grabs onto his hand, saying that he was hurt because of her, and she would like to treat him at the very least. He tells her if that'll put her at ease, then to go for it. A man then quickly starts running into the hangar, saying that there's a huge problem. Victor asks what the big deal is for him to come in screaming like this, and the dude says that he's gone. I searched the entire waiting room and all over the lodging, but I can't find the rider Andre anywhere. It then jumps to some men talking. One of them is eating, while the other says that they succeeded in winning over Andre. So now the princess doesn't have any riders she can use. It seems they somehow succeeded in repairing their gigant, though. The man puts his glass down, saying he thought they told him that it could not be activated. When the other dude says that he thought that'd be the case, the man slams his glass on the table and slaps the dude, knocking him to the floor, saying that he hates apologies the most because it means that he's made a mistake. The man pleads, saying if he just gives him one more chance, he'll make sure, but the man who slapped him tells him to get lost as he is fired. We are finally introduced to Count Monake, who asks his people if there have been any other variables, and they immediately panic, saying none. Monake says there can't be even a sliver of probability, not until Reina is completely his, and that soon everyone will know just what kind of person the master of Count Monake is. It jumps back to the arena for the final match of the day, and it's Mir versus Achilles. The shoutcasters say that there is an overwhelming difference between the two. Count Monake's Achilles is the lamer fiefdoms champion, boasting 70 victories and not a single loss. They don't know what Mir is prepared to do against this champion, but it probably won't work. There's another problem here, as Mir is nowhere to be seen in the arena, and maybe they have abandoned the match. The crowd starts to wonder if Mir got scared and ran away, telling them to give their money back. Monake laughs, asking if Reina has given up because she doesn't have a rider, saying that's why she should have just quietly accepted his marriage proposal. He plans to show her what happens when she bruises his pride. It jumps back to the hangar, where the assistant was crying about Andre, and it seems Count Monake has tricked them. Victor says that Andre is a loyal vassal, asking if he's really meant to believe they've been betrayed. The assistant says there are people who've seen him entering the Count's camp, and even without stealing Andre away, there's still a difference in strength between their gigants to begin with. Reina starts to panic and get very anxious because this means they won't be able to fight. Sheymon says that if she cannot participate, that means she's going to be forced to marry Monake, asking if he's wrong. He says if that is truly the only outcome, then this might be too meddlesome, but he believes that he can help with this as well. Reina asks how he's going to do that, and even Philip says it's not that he doesn't believe him, but surely he hasn't forgotten the accident that occurred the last time he tried to operate a gigant. Sheymon tells him not to worry, as he's got a plan. We then hear Mir's footsteps as the crowd and the shoutcasters start to feel a little relieved, saying they thought that Mir had given up on the fight, but it's finally walking into the arena just at the last second. We see Monake a little frustrated, saying that he thought there were no riders left on the princess's side. His man says he's sure there weren't any more. Monake asks if that means she hired a mercenary, saying that can't be, and he's sure that the pilot doesn't understand the significance of this match. Still, he can't believe there was someone so far gone that they dared to take the princess's side in his territory. We see Reina and Victor finally made it up to the viewing platform, and she asks if the match has started yet. Victor says no, and they're luckily not late. Reina says it may be a relief, but asks if this is truly okay. At a glance, the difference between the gigants in size is incredibly big, and the opposing rider is also the lamer territory champion. We then see it's actually not Sheymon in the gigant, and he says it'll be okay. Although he looks rather simple-minded, it turns out that the man inside of the mech is none other than Philip. Sheymon compliments him, saying that he's actually very skilled. Philip just wonders why he's doing this. The shoutcasters say that now that the gigant Mir, who they all expected to forfeit, has arrived in time, it means the match can soon begin. The spectators wonder if this means that a gigant that's small is really going to fight back against Achilles, and another bursts out in laughter, saying he can't believe this. Soon everybody else starts laughing as well, saying they should have just run away, and they can't believe they're calling something so shitty a gigant, asking if it's even able to move. Achilles says that he'll applaud the fact that he didn't run away. However, he must be aware of what the match entails, as he has no intention of going easy on him. Philip says that he won't know until he sees it in action. Achilles says he'd like to put that confidence of his to the test, as he slams his mace forward directly at Mir. Philip manages to sidestep it, saying as expected, his power really befits his size. However, that doesn't mean he's going to win. As he leaps into the air, he says that even though Achilles is big and strong, it doesn't mean he's actually a good fighter. But Achilles turns to him and immediately tries to counter-swing while he's still in the air. Philip's surprised that he's actually really quick, unbefitting of his large size, and has to duck underneath the attack. Achilles says he didn't expect him to dodge it, but now, after seeing what he has, he can tell that his confidence was all baseless. Philip says that was low-key dangerous, and he starts to sweat, saying this might be pretty bad. The fight continues as the shoutcasters say that Achilles is attacking over and over, unleashing a flurry of blows towards Mir. But of course, there's been no substantial damage so far. Achilles' pilot starts to get annoyed. He swings again, directly toward Mir's head, but Philip manages to matrix underneath it. The shoutcasters say they thought this would be a very quick match, but it turns out that's not the case. Mir has not been hit a single time so far. Victor says they can't win by running forever, and Reyna snaps at him, saying he can't act like this because Philip is a strong knight. Sheymon just stands there, saying he can hear them whispering. While Philip has faced countless knights before, so there's no doubt that he's a good knight, he'll need to educate him later, because all he's doing currently is running away. Philip wonders if this dude is ever going to get tired, then immediately gets into a stance, unleashing a sneak attack swinging directly down Achilles' chest. Achilles blocks it with his weapon, but freezes up for a second, only to unleash a killing intent, asking if this means he's finally ready to fight properly. Philip says hell no. Achilles raises his mace into the air, saying he's going to give it his all from here on out. The shoutcasters say this is actually his finishing move, asking if Mir will be able to dodge this one as well. Philip looks up, saying that this isn't going to be pretty, as an explosion soon follows from where Achilles attacked. Due to all the dust that has been sent flying, they can't really see anything, but Achilles knows what's going on. He says that's unbelievable because he knows Mir was not far enough to evade that attack, asking how he did so. Philip says that Uncle Rogers is going to kill him if he finds out, but he has no other choice since he's got to win because the young lord has his hopes on him. He adds that Achilles is going to regret this moment for the rest of his life because he's going to make him unleash his full power. As the aura around Mir begins to change, Achilles' pilot laughs, saying he's a little excited by the aura Mir is producing. He had a feeling from Mir's movements, but it seems like he's finally met a good opponent. Monike then starts to chime in, asking Achilles' pilot what the hell he's doing. The pilot starts to panic, and Monike asks if he's really struggling against a piece of junk like that, questioning if he knows the consequences of losing. The pilot says he's sorry to disappoint him, but from now on, he'll show him a satisfactory performance. As he's adjusting the output on his gigant, we see it going full throttle as he's releasing his power as well. Achilles immediately widens his stance and says he would like to have another fair duel someday else because that day is not today. He leaps off the ground, dashing straight in towards Mir with his weapon pulled back. Philip says that he's going to be too busy to accept another fight after this. Achilles slams down on where Philip was standing, only to be surprised that Mir didn't get caught up in the attack. We see that Achilles' arm has actually been completely severed, leaving him confused about what just occurred. Achilles says that this aura and speed are no doubt starting to bring back memories. He disappeared 3 years ago, but he is the undefeated legend of the gigant arena called the Black Knight's Phantom Sword. As Philip dashes back through Achilles, slicing the mech straight through the middle, the shoutcasters are completely amazed by this, saying something unprecedented has occurred. Achilles has been made inoperable in a flash, and Mir is now the winner. They can't believe the underdog actually took a W. The crowd starts to go crazy, chanting Philip's name and even stomping their feet. Achilles' pilot laughs, saying he didn't think he'd get to meet the Black Knight once again. Philip asks if he knows him. The pilot says he had the chance to fight him in the Royal Arena 3 years ago, but Philip disappeared randomly after setting such an absurd record. The pilot asks why he's in a place like this. Philip says he's the Black Knight, so it's normal for him to help anybody in need. The pilot laughs, saying he guesses he's right. Philip apologizes, asking him if he can keep the fact that he's the Black Knight a secret. The pilot says he's fine with that, as he's getting fired anyway. Philip says, "My bad, bro." Victor begins to cry, telling Reyna that they won, while Sheymon just expected as much. Reyna just wonders why Victor is crying. Sheymon starts to smirk while looking over at Reyna, saying he guesses this much should be fine, and then he heads back down towards the hangar. As he goes to the betting area, looking up at the odds, he starts to smile, saying gambling is all about the flow. His odds were 21-1, and he bet the whole 10,000 they've made until now. He says it sure is an easy world to make money and even shows us how much they started with, how much they made from gambling and betting, giving them a grand total of 210,000 from the 3,000 they started with. They head back to the port of the city, and Sheymon says that it's time for them to leave. Reyna says they can't thank him enough for everything that he's done. Sheymon says there's no need to worry about it. All they did was help out people who needed it. She says it must have been difficult for him and wishes she could have shown him proper gratitude. He laughs, saying it's okay and he thinks she's given plenty. If they hadn't met him, they never would have earned this much to begin with. To be honest, he would like to stay here longer, but since they caused a huge scene, it would be better to leave before his identity is revealed. She says she can now see the bigger picture and hopes things haven't become too complicated for him. He says there's no need to worry, though he thinks it would be better for her to leave the area as soon as possible, because if Count Monike is willing to do anything, he won't give up so easily and is likely already scheming his next set of plans. Victor says that he is definitely correct, and they need to leave while Count has no reason to keep them here. Sheymon says they understand that she's worried about the refugees, but even if she stays here, there's nothing she can do to help every one of them. For a better future, he thinks it would be wise for her to take a step back for now. She says that she's aware. However, for her, that would be difficult. Although she may seem stubborn and ignorant right now, she can't just leave her people without someone to rule or rely on. Even if it's just a little more, she wants to help them as much as she can. Sheymon starts to smile, saying he sees, and he shakes her hand, telling her to stay safe. She says that she hopes his journey is safe as well. He says he's looking forward to when they meet again. As they start heading back, Philip says that since he's managed to solve such a large issue, all that's left for him is to return and be crowned a hero. But he wonders why Sheymon brought those awful engineers along, saying he should have just gamed them for their money. Sheymon says that he thought he told him they didn't have any iron mages within their lands. Philip says, technically they don't. Sheymon asks how they're meant to fix the gigant without them, and Philip says he thought he'd fix it like he did Mir. Sheymon sighs, asking if he knows how to restore a repaired Mona stone on his own, calling him stupid. Sheymon says there's a reason why he's still at the bottom of the chain of command, and he tells him to stop yapping and just protect them. Philip starts to cry, saying that bro is so mean. Back at the Locken State, we see that Hans is stressed, yelling, and asking somebody why they were here taking their stuff. It's none other than Darren. Hans says he thought they had time. Darren says he's glad he brought up the time, and he believed him when he said he'd pay off such a great debt. Yet, he betrayed them all and ran away in the middle of the night, asking why he has to wait. Philip then appears behind him, calling out to him, scaring him. Darren asks him who he is. Philip introduces himself, saying he's the young lord's escort knight. Darren looks around, wondering where Sheymon is, but doesn't see him, and asks Philip why he's alone and where he is. Philip says he's actually here to deliver something. As he opens a chest full of gold, Darren says there's no way, as it hasn't even been a week yet, but he already managed to earn over the 30,000 he owes. The engineers are even calling Philip master, asking if this is fine and if this is enough. As they take a lot of the money out of the carriages, Philip calls them fools, saying surely they can see that Lord Darren is busy and they need to hurry up and load it into his carriage. They start picking up and moving it. Darren tells him that there's no need to rush and he'll wait to receive it directly from the young lord. Philip starts to smile and pulls out a whole essay. He clears his throat and starts reading it, saying he assumes he's already planning his next move. Darren asks what he's talking about, and Philip says this is a message from the young lord to him. He says that now that they've paid off their debt, he is now considered a trespasser, and he suggests that he prepare himself if he intends to stay and make a scene. According to the imperial noble laws, nobles who have their territory or a building under their care trespassed upon have the right to execute said trespassers. So, unless he wants to be split into two, he suggests that he return now. That was the end of Sheymon's message. He added a little extra bit, saying he'll give him 3 seconds to leave. Darren shivers and immediately gets on his wagon, starting to haul cheeks again, telling them that they are courting death. Philip says at least he listens and understands how scary the young lord is. We hear Rogers calling out to him. Philip says everybody can be happy, as they have finally been able to do what they wanted, but Philip sees that the reaction's not going as planned, as Rogers is running at him, all pissed, asking how dare he sell the statue of Master Locken. Even Dixon says he's not going to get away with this. They start roughing him up, asking where the young lord is, and Philip says to just give him a second to explain. Rogers says to just answer the question and not make any excuses. Philip reluctantly agrees and tells them exactly where it is. It jumps to some crows in the air. We see he's returned to none other than his own castle. As he opens the gates, he heads inside, saying this place is a complete mess. But that makes sense, as there's no way they would have taken good care of it. He snaps his fingers as the lights start to cut on. He says he should just be thankful that it's still standing after 500 years. Take a shot anytime the years are mentioned. He looks over at a staircase, and he says this place is filled with memories of Katarina. He starts to smile, saying no matter what happens, he'll protect it. However, this is what's important. As he heads to his library, he puts his hand on one of the bookshelves and sighs, saying that he hopes it still works. He starts to imbue his aura into it. We see it activating some kind of hidden passage as the door opens. He says that he knew it would still work because the dwarves are perfect craftsmen, and it, low-key, works better than he expected. Though, He heads inside, saying it's time to rightfully take what's his. Sheymon starts to head down a staircase, saying the best way to fight off a curse is to have a stronger mana pool than the curse itself. That's advice he's heard a very long time ago, and at the moment, that's the only solution he has. He starts to go even deeper as he has to push open another door using his mana. As it creaks open, he says it's been 5 centuries since he was last here. He tells somebody they did great protecting the house, and we see it's none other than some kind of core in a jar. He says that he does like that they are quieter than before, but still, it's been quite a while. We are introduced to the demon Horith. He explains that back when it was actually the territories of the demons themselves, before he claimed the castle as his, he had to fight his way through using his magic. As we see him putting his hands up, casting a spell called Death Bullet, disintegrating the demons launching at him. As soon as he's done, he starts heading forward and he's asking somebody if they are the ruler of this place. A woman sighs, saying that she heard that he took down several fortresses already, so he was some 8th circle old geezer. We are introduced to the high demon Horith, but she's surprised that he's young, saying that she's quite disappointed. Though, it is impressive for a human. Since she's touched by his hard work, she'll show him some mercy. She tells him that he can ask her anything he wants, and it's only right that she satisfies his curiosity before he goes. He says that she is the chattiest demon he's ever met, asking if the demon's rank increases the more that they yap. She starts to get annoyed, calling him a fool, saying that she showed him mercy, yet he just rejected it. It seems that he's got quite arrogant after defeating some lower-level demons. However, she will show him that the demons here are nothing like the ones he has fought up until now. Sheymon tells her not to worry, as he's not dumb enough to go into a battlefield all on his own, as his golem boys break through the wall. Horith is surprised to see golems, and the fight begins between the higher-tier demons and Sheymon's army. Sheymon also intervenes by cutting some of the demons in half. Horith is well to his golems. After a bit of fighting, they are now standing before one another before leaping at each other to land a finishing blow. We see an explosion, and then shortly after, the remnants of the fight. Horith asks what he intends to do by converting her into demonic energy, asking if he's really trying to change the world. He tells her that she doesn't need to know, as he starts to sap all the energy out of her, turning her into a pure core of demonic energy. He says the whole process of taking her down was many times more difficult than the other guys, and that if you absorb powerful demonic energy incorrectly, it might throw you into a rage. He has witnessed people turn into horrifying creatures because of that. He couldn't absorb it because of the high risk back then, but when he had learned the correct method to safely absorb it, he had already reached the 9th circle and didn't need it anymore. He didn't expect to use it now, as he never expected the reincarnation to happen. His chest starts to hurt hella bad as he stumbles, losing his balance, coughing up a storm. He then opens his eyes, surprised, as he is now inside a different area, aka the mind's realm. He says it looks like he wasn't beaten by the demonic energy, and when he looks up, he sees none other than Horith sitting off in the distance. As she turns, looking at him, she asks him who he is. She stands up, exuding some intense pressure. Sheymon says that it will be hard to withstand with his current body. Even though it's been so many years, she still has a ton of demonic energy. He goes to tell her that he says he's come here to borrow her power, but she immediately starts to realize who he is as she leaps forward, grabbing him by the throat, putting him on the ground, saying that he's so weak now that she almost didn't recognize him. Asking what he's doing here, he says that he needs to borrow her vessel, and she laughs, asking if that's the case and wonders if he's even going to have the power to do it, because she doesn't think it's possible. But the body is weak, as the one he is currently residing in. She says she can't believe that her enemy, who's trapped her here for so long, has walked in such a pitiful state on his own. And now he wants her strength, asking if he also finds it kind of ironic. Sheymon realizes that she could break his neck at any moment, and he grabs her wrist, asking if she's really okay with this. She's confused, asking what he means, and he says that he came here with a decent proposal, yet she's just going to kill him off without hearing it. He knows that she'll want his whole body as a magic supply, so she won't hurt him. She starts to laugh at him, thinking it's not worth her time, then lets go of him, saying that she'll at least recognize his bravery, and starts to smile, asking if he really thinks he can withstand her strength with his circle shattered. Sheymon says if he can't, then she can just take over his body, and there are no downsides for her, who has been trapped here for centuries. Horith says she wonders if there isn't a much simpler solution, as she snaps her fingers. Some demonic aura starts to grab onto his arms and legs, and she laughs, saying that she's going to play with him for as long as she's been trapped in here, saying surely he should be able to bear at least this much. Sheymon wonders what's going on because he can't even control his body anymore. She starts to laugh, asking if he thinks he has the time to ponder. He's phasing in and out of consciousness, and she mocks him for passing out due to her mind magic, asking where his pride is gone. He finally starts to laugh as well, saying that she's just as noisy as ever. She asks if bluffing is the only thing he's capable of doing, saying that he doesn't even have the same mana nor the same circle tier he had in the past. Sheymon says, even powerless with his circle shattered, there's definitely more he can do. She's surprised as he completely disappears from in front of her. He says that he does not need to remind her that he has reached the 9th circle with black magic back in his original form. He tells her he would never fall victim to mind control, as he is now the one controlling her. She sees him as a giant entity. He stretches his hand out towards her, completely crushing her. She then opens her eyes, having cold sweats, saying that she knew it from the start and that he sure is quite entertaining. But to think that he'd actually have reached the 9th circle in the end. Sheymon asks if she doesn't believe him, saying he can show her more. She says that's enough and simply meant that despite reaching that level, it seems like he was unable to change the world. He tells her that it's not over yet. In the end, he will still accomplish his goal. She starts to smirk, saying she doesn't know how well he'll be able to make use of her power, but if it's him, he'd be able to reach the 9th circle again. Sheymon says, of course, as she walks up, putting her hand around his neck, saying that he seems quite confident. Even if she inhabits his body, the 6th or 7th circle would suffice, and she'll leave him to crush the world. As she leans closer, placing her head on his chest, starting to fade out into pure demonic energy, Sheymon says that he guesses he's going to have to work hard so that he doesn't disappoint her. She says, of course, while looking up at him, and then tells him that he can't fail this time. He then snaps out of it, back into reality, still physically tired from that. He sticks his hand out, using a spell called Dark Flame, shooting it out at the wall. He says it looks like it's only at the 3rd circle, but still, just having a foundation is already huge, so it's more than enough. Maybe it's because it's purified demonic energy, but the color is different from before. And if Horith wanted to, she would have been able to take control of his body just fine. He'll have to make good on her expectations. Sheymon already knew the theory and enlightenment behind each circle, so going up to the 9th circle won't be a problem now. However, in order to gather enough demonic energy for that, it's going to take a long time, so he might as well get started immediately. He places his hand on the wall, doing the same formation as before, opening yet another secret passage. Bro's house is too damn big. He starts to walk through it and heads to the middle of a very open room. He talks to somebody, saying they've been resting for 500 years and it's time to get up and work. As he puts his hand in the middle of the room, he starts to activate a giant magic circle and says, right now, it's your turn to help me, as his golem army is now starting to arise once more. Then it jumps to Count Manak's residence, as we see a man getting punched in the face. It's none other than the pilot, Mylan. Monike asks if he knows what he did wrong. Mylan says that he's sorry for losing and he hopes he can forgive him. Monike asks if he really thinks it's all because of the match, saying no matter how he thinks about it, there's something odd. Mylan asks what he means, and Monike says even though the difference in performance between the gigant is 5-fold, to lose like that, surely anybody would think he was working with Reina in secret. Mylan tells him that he vowed his loyalty to him and he would never betray him. He swears on his honor as a knight that he never did such a thing. Monike starts to grin, asking if his honor as a knight is all he has, and he better say something else before his head goes rolling. Mylan says he knows something about the other gigant pilot. 3 years ago, he faced off against him at the Imperial Gigant Arena, and he was a famous knight, as he's never lost. Bro really folded. Monike asks if he knows who he was affiliated with. Mylan watches the sword that almost killed him get put down, and he says they left not long after, so nobody knows his identity. Monike says he sees, and this means he has nothing else useful to say. Yet another sword has been unsheathed for some reason. Mylan is left confused and goes to beg for his life, but ultimately gets cut down in the end. As Monike leaves his room, one of his men tells him that Reina has remained here inside of Lamer. Monike asks why, and the man says it's because she's unable to leave the refugees. Monike says the dude just needs to keep tabs on her, and he adds one more thing, to look into the pilot that was controlling Mir and find out where he lives, because he will see this man himself and crush him as he's looking at an army of gigants, low-key foreshadowing that they might go to war. We hear Sheymon telling somebody that ever since a long time ago, the Locken household has thrived because of the nearby river and fertile lands. However, most have left now, leaving many houses abandoned, and there are already 3 villages on the brink of becoming ghost towns. We see him looking over all of this from a cliff, and he turns, asking somebody what they think about this problem. It's none other than Dixon, who is tied up and panicking. Sheymon unsheathes his sword and starts swinging it around, and Dixon asks why he's doing this. Sheymon says that he needs to stop playing dumb, as this is all his fault. Dixon cries, saying there's nothing he could do about it, and that he tried his best. Sheymon raises his blade, asking if he really did, and all Dixon does is scream. Sheymon says he would love to hang him in the middle of the square as an example, but the more he looked into his background, the more interesting he became. He's a talented individual recognized by the Empire, but he turned down offers from other states and came here instead. Sheymon then sheathes his sword, and Dixon immediately thanks him. Sheymon says that he asked for the last 10 years' worth of financial records in order to see how he's been doing, and Dixon actually brought it to him within a day without any errors. Sheymon admits he's pretty useful. Dixon starts to get all squirmy and blushes, saying that he's really good at arithmetic and just straight up starts gloating. Bro is loving the compliments. Sheymon tells him that's the problem, and Dixon asks what he means. Sheymon grabs him by his collar and throws him off the cliff, causing him to tumble down. Sheymon slides down after him, and they eventually make it to the bottom. Dixon asks why he's doing this. As he looks up, he's surprised to see some straight slums in front of him. He asks if these are really residents of their region, saying this is impossible because, when he calculated the average, there shouldn't have been any slums like this. Sheymon asks how it feels to actually take a look at the village himself. Dixon asks what he means, and Sheymon tells him he can't summarize human life into numbers alone. He needs to spend time with the people and figure out for himself why the Viscounty is in this state. If he can't find the cause, then he will no longer be working for him. Dixon asks if he's going to fire him, and Sheymon asks if he would rather quit instead. Dixon immediately runs over towards the citizens and introduces himself as the accountant of the Locken household. Sheymon says that he's fine just watching the household fall, but there is a better time for that. He needs to focus on improving this place so that he can raise his circle without having to worry about anything else. We then hear some people yelling at Philip, asking if it's true that the debts were repaid by gambling. Philip says yes, as we see him tied up with all the money behind him. The people of the mansion start saying the image of the household is going to plummet if people figure out he gambled to get their money. They ask Philip why he didn't stop him. Han says they built up the reputation, and now it's just going to be destroyed. Rogers is also pissed. He starts grinding his teeth, calling out to Philip, who panics, asking him what he wants because he's scared of Rogers. Rogers asks if his identity was revealed, telling him to tell the truth. Philip says of course not, because he's not stupid. Then he immediately recalls telling Victor and the rest that he was from the Locken household, realizes he screwed up, and says maybe he is that dumb. Rogers starts barking at him. Philip tells him that it wasn't during the games. It is the truth. Han says that even if his identity was not exposed, it's only a matter of time before everybody figures it out, considering Count Manak's intel, as he is the head of Lamer. All news will reach him, and considering his evil personality, it's possible he may try to retaliate. If he were to do that, there's nothing they could do, as he is a distant cousin of the Emperor. Rogers says that Monarchy has always expanded his territory through wars, and they've basically given him a reason to wage war against them. Han says he wonders what the young lord was thinking when he did this. Sheymon finally steps up, saying he can't listen to this shit anymore. They're all surprised that he's here. He asks where the ones who were saying that the representation of the household is important are. He asks if they're really trying to ignore the evil deeds that are happening in front of them. Rogers says that they're just speaking realistically, as their military force is nothing compared to Count Manak's. They just wanted to let Sheymon know that his decisions have now put the entire household in danger. This is the first time in the entire series so far we've actually seen Sheymon genuinely angry since reincarnating. He asks if they earned their title of hero by kissing the asses of those in power, saying that he thought they were given their title because they fought, even in the most disadvantageous situations, for the sake of justice. Hans tries to tell him that the people here are giving their all for the Locken household, asking how he could say something so absurd. Sheymon immediately asks him if the problems were resolved, and Hans realizes they weren't. Sheymon says yet they were all making a big deal out of his gambling. Hans tells him it's serious because if people find out he paid off his debts through gambling, the reputation will plummet. Sheymon tells him that this is enough, asking if a good reputation will solve the hunger in their territory. He tells them their duties are to protect the people first and foremost. The Viscounty's people are starving and leaving because the conditions are unbearable, yet they still can't get their priorities straight. He walks past Hans, calling him a fool, saying he will not ever tolerate this kind of behavior again from any of them, as he is going to change it all from here on out. He says if they believe that his orders are not right, they can leave, and those who cannot follow his orders will all be dismissed. Hans starts to panic and chases after him, saying that the people have all served the household for a very long time. He sighs, saying that he doesn't like people with narrow-minded perspectives and that he'll show them his resolves. He immediately starts complimenting Philip, saying he did great on the journey and that he was very skilled as a captain. Philip is confused, asking him what he's talking about, and Sheymon says it's only right for someone like him to be the knight captain. He asks Rogers what he thinks, and Rogers asks him what he's trying to do. Sheymon smirks, saying that it's simple. He's going to have them duel, and the one who wins will be appointed as the knight captain. Philip starts to tear up, saying that he can never do such a thing as Rogers is his uncle and the one who taught him how to wield a sword. Rogers tells Philip to be quiet and says that he understands. He hasn't had the chance yet to prove his skills to Sheymon, and Sheymon says that he hopes he's as good as he makes himself out to be. It then jumps to them at the training area. Rogers says it's been quite a while since the two of them fought. Philip says it's been a few years, and he's still confused about what's going on, but he starts to unsheath his blade, saying he's going to give it his all regardless. Rogers does the same. When he unsheaths his blade, the air immediately gets sharper around him as they have their WWE stare down. Rogers says that they should try to enjoy this while they can. We see Sheymon watching. Philip raises his blade, saying he's going to attack. Sheymon can tell that Philip is nervous and asks if this means Rogers is strong. Sheymon says that since he has faced countless knights in the past as the Demon King, he can tell that Philip is actually quite strong. Philip dashes through using one of his signature abilities, the Phantom Sword, dashing right through Rogers. When he turns to look at the damage, we see Rogers has blocked it, saying that it seems he's gotten better as his skills have improved. Philip tells him that he's different from before as he immediately dashes back, and one of the thrusts goes right by Rogers' head. Rogers watches as he gets dashed around and is surprised, saying that it looks like Philip has not been messing around with his training, as his footwork seems to have improved an exceptional amount. Philip then goes for an attack from behind as we see him leaping through the air. Rogers says that it seems Sheymon has praised him for good reasons. However, in order to pick up a blade that protects the family, it's still too early. He grabs Philip by the collar and slams him into the arena, saying that he needs to train a lot more to get to where he needs to be. We see Philip's eyes go completely white as he starts to lose consciousness. Rogers then raises his leg and kicks him, sending him flying and causing him to land on his back. Philip wakes back up and grits his teeth, saying that he's not done yet, but Rogers puts the blade right to his neck, saying that he believes the match is actually over. Philip looks regretful, but decides it is and surrenders. Rogers says that this is more than enough to show why he is the knight commander of their region, and Sheymon smiles, saying that was pretty impressive. Then it jumps to some time later as Rogers is training the knights. We see Sheymon watching. Rogers says they better not quit, as they haven't run much so far, and they all apologize. Rogers reminds them that the young lord is watching, so they need to perform exceptionally well. Sheymon thinks about it, saying he never thought Philip would lose that easily. Philip says that it's because Uncle Rogers is one of the top 5 swordsmen on the entire continent. Sheymon says that if someone like Rogers were to target him, he'd have no choice but to die. Philip apologizes. Sheymon then tells Philip that he intends on selecting him as his official escort knight, and that he needs to make sure to do whatever it takes to fulfill that role. Philip is completely surprised to hear this, and even starts to tear up. Tightening his grip, he says he'll do his best. We see him super happy, saying that, in order to become the blade that protects Sheymon, he'll show him that he is worthy of his trust. Sheymon says that he needs to hurry up and join them in training, and Philip runs off. Sheymon says to think 10 out of the 50 knights would be considered experts. They can only thank their warrior lineage for that. It's not just Philip. Even Rogers is incredibly talented, and most people would wish to have even a fraction of what they own. If that's the case, it's clear why the family is in such a bad state. That night at the estate, we see Hans shaking, asking Sheymon what he thinks he's doing. First, he sold the statue, and now he's selling all of the family treasures, asking if he intends to throw away the honor of his family name. Sheymon says that if it makes him money, then he intends to do exactly that. Hans puts his hands on the table, asking him why he's doing this, completely panicked, and we see him low-key holding back his anger. Sheymon looks up at him, saying that the great hero Loken, who died 500 years ago, is no help to them right now. Hans is startled, asking how he can say such a thing. Sheymon tells him to think about it, saying it's because of those old principles they held on to, all in the name of honoring the great warrior Loken, that the family has fallen into this state to begin with. It's because of vassals like Hans that the family name has fallen to ruins. Hans says that's impossible because if it wasn't for the curse of the Demon King, but Sheymon cuts him off, saying that attitude is another problem. They praise their predecessors for fortune and blame the Demon King for their downfall. He starts to unsheath the dagger, telling Hans he would like to make himself clear. He intends to become someone greater than the warrior Loken. If Hans intends to stay tied to the family's old principles, he will erase them from the family's history as he stabs the small picture of the hero. We then hear the door slam as Sheymon leaves, and the other attendants run over to Hans, asking if he's okay. Hans says that he remembers the days when the young master sat on his lap and listened as he read him stories. He can't believe how much he's changed, the way he constantly visits the Demon King's castle and all these other changes. There's only one explanation, and he's sure that it must be the Demon King's curse plaguing the family. We then hear Philip calling out to Sheymon, saying just this one time, surely he can take Hans's advice and that what he said just now was too much. Sheymon asks if Philip really thinks this is too harsh, saying that his thoughts are a little different. He intends to not give Hans any space to think and to push back as much as possible. They can talk about that later. He then asks Philip if he's completed the task for him. Philip is surprised, saying that his voice is too loud and that this is information he barely managed to get from Hans. Sheymon then asks where it is. Philip looks around, asking him to be a little quieter, and then puts his hand up to whisper. It takes us to the dungeons. We see Sheymon's boots as he approaches one of the gates. He tells Philip this is different from what he told him, as the man chained up looks low-key dead. Philip tells him that just yesterday he was alive and healthy, and the man had asked who he was while exuding immense pressure. Sheymon says that he can tell this is the strength of at least a fifth circle. Rather, he's probably way stronger than that. The old man tells him he's not going to repeat himself, and that he needs to answer his question. The man continues to glare at Sheymon, and Sheymon says that he's heard he's been locked up here for a long time, but he seems just fine to him. The man recognizes his voice, saying that it can't be. Sheymon says he can't believe the fiefdom's soul iron mage is rotting away in a place like this. The old man calls out to him, asking why he stepped into such a place for his sake. Sheymon asks if he really thought he would do nothing while someone wasted away in his territory. He mentions that he heard the old man has been harming himself by abstaining from food and drink, which is why Hans locked him in here. The man says that he lost consciousness due to the gigant and an accident caused by his carelessness, asking Sheymon if that was not the case. He wishes for nothing more than to atone for it with his life. Sheymon asks if he believes his life to be worth that much, saying that it was already confirmed that the accident was not his fault. The old man insists that, if only he had examined it more closely, it never would have happened. Therefore, it was definitely his fault, and he wishes to be punished thoroughly for it. Sheymon gets annoyed, saying that he can tell the old man is incredibly loyal, but he's just killing himself with his stubbornness. He sighs, saying that it can't be helped, and since that's what the old man wishes for, he'll do just that. He tells Philip to bring a sword. Philip is startled, asking if he's serious. The old man closes his eyes, waiting for his punishment. Sheymon starts to unsheath the blade, saying that since the old man asked for it, he shall give him exactly what he wants. He raises it into the air, telling the old man not to hold it against him, and slashes the sword forward, only to cut the chains off the old man. The old man is confused. He looks up, asking Sheymon what the reason is. Sheymon says it would benefit him more to use the old man than to kill him, and he can't stand taking an L right now. He's planning on working the old man to the bone, to the point where he'd wish he was dead. It is his duty to pledge lifelong allegiance to Sheymon and assist when needed. He tells the old man to swear it on his honor as a magician and to engrave this moment onto his heart. Sheymon then tells Philip to take out what they brought. Philip starts to pour gold coins out. The old man is startled, asking where all the money came from. Sheymon says that's not important. There's around 70,000 here. He points the blade at the old man once more, telling him to use this money to prepare to raise the magic tower, buy any grimoires he needs, and procure the necessary equipment to repair and manufacture gigants. Unlike the past lords, Sheymon plans to invest heavily in magic, and they need to make sure that such an incident never takes place again. The old man's eyes start to fill up with tears, and he apologizes for all the harm he has caused, saying he doesn't know if it's right for him to receive such goodwill. Sheymon asks him what he thinks he's saying, reminding him that this is not goodwill, but rather a punishment. He tells him to resolve himself, as he does not intend to forgive him so easily, and he stretches his hand out towards the man. The man is speechless and then immediately starts kneeling. We learn his name is Mute, and Mute says that until the day of his death, he will devote himself to atoning for his sins. Philip says that Sir Mute's mana is incredible as he starts to exude it all through the room. Sheymon smiles, saying that he has not an ounce of flexibility in his body, but that stubbornness of his is going to be really useful. He then tells Mute that there are 2 more iron mages now in the fiefdom, so he'll leave them in his care. Hans is eavesdropping, and he can't believe that he's convinced somebody as stubborn as Mute to help him. But for some reason, he can't shake this feeling of anxiousness that he has. We get a time skip of a whole month later. We hear everybody training, and we see Hans and the other assistants watching from above. Hans says that the family is changing. Philip, who was far from earnest, is now training harder than anybody else. Mute, who had hidden himself in shame due to his past mistakes, is now taking the initiative in training recruits. We then hear Dixon telling everybody it's been a while, and they turn, seeing him back from his journey. He says it's a relief they all seem well. Hans says that the fiefdom was in chaos searching for him, asking where he's been this entire time. He apologizes for intentionally causing them any harm, and says he'll keep a long story short by just saying that it'd be better if he showed them all this. Hans and the others wonder what it's going to be, and then we see him asking how this is possible. The village we saw a month ago has been completely changed into that of a bustling city. Dixon laughs, saying that he can't have Hans so shocked from the beginning. He starts asking him if he sees the market over on the side. Unlike before, anyone is free to sell their wares, and this was decided together with the residents. Now everybody is discussing how to improve the fiefdom together, and the old inefficient traditions are getting abolished. Dixon looks really content, asking Hans if he thinks the fiefdom is looking as it should now, with everything being more prosperous. Hans bites his lips, saying he has no choice but to agree. However, there is no denying that everything happening now is going against the last 500 years of the Locken family's policies. Back at the manor, Rogers laughs, saying that he had the same concerns that Hans is having now, but he has let it all go as Sheymon has proven himself with results, so he has nothing more to say. He then sits up, saying it's time to go train, so he'll have to excuse himself. He tells Hans that it is their duty to place all of their trust in the young lord, and he tells him that he'll talk to him later as he leaves. Hans says that within that short time, everybody has already been completely won over by the young lord, and he's debating if he should succumb as well. 1 week later, it's pouring down rain, and Hans tells him that he's organized all the documents he had asked for him. We see the rain leaking into the office as well, and Sheymon apologizes for dumping so much work on him, saying that he will be counting on him. Hans says that he will resolve the issue regarding the office leaks tomorrow, and if anything else comes up, to let him know. He goes to tell him he could repair it himself, but Sheymon tells him that his priorities are wrong. Those who have nowhere to shelter from the rain are overflowing in their fiefdom, and he should think about those people first. Hans clenches his fist, saying that the more he comes to know the young lord, the more he finds that following him is the right thing to do. But still, there's something that he can't shake, and he has to get to the bottom of this feeling. Some other night, we see Hans dashing around, tree to tree, as he is following Sheymon, saying that he secretly heads out every night. These regular visits of his are to the Demon King's castle, and he doesn't even want to consider it, but if the young lord were to be taken over by the Demon King curse, it might be the end of the family. Sheymon then stops moving, and Hans wonders what's going on and if maybe he was noticed. Then we hear other men running up, asking the young lord if he's surprised that they're here already. Hans says it can't be, as we see some bandit-like men saying they've already done it, and that the thing that they were tasked to do was so easy it took no time at all. Hans says they were the bandits who were banished from their fiefdom for their plundering, so they've been living here and hiding, and there seems to be quite a lot. Sheymon says that they work fast, and he likes that, and then asks them if it's time for them to begin as he's reaching into his bag. The bandits ask him if he's prepared a nice gift for them, and Sheymon says yes, if they're ready for it. The bandits start to laugh, saying that they made sure to understand the books that he gave them last time. Hans wonders why they were given a book in the first place, saying it's odd and they're going too far for him to actually hear anything. He wonders what Sheymon is planning, but we see it's a lot more wholesome than that as they start crying tears of joy, saying they're no longer illiterate because he summarized the plot for them. They were able to understand even the hardest parts. Hans is completely confused now. A woman comes out with her child, saying thanks to the young lord. Even her kids can read now too. It turns out this is a sentiment shared by most of the town, as he has been giving them food and medicine as well. He's pretty much all of their family's savior, and they are more than grateful to him. Sheymon just says that he's glad he can help them. However, there is a price to everything, and he's sure they're prepared. The bandits say, of course, as while they may have spent their lives as bandits, they're not ungrateful animals, and he just needs to give them an order as they'll do anything he says. Sheymon says that's perfect, and then he dumps the bag out in front of them, which is just a lot of golden books. Han says that's probably around 10,000 pesos, but he sees more books, wondering what he is plotting. The bandits ask what this is as well. They say they understand the books, but why the money? Sheymon says the answer is within the books, and once they read them, they'll understand. Inside, some of the books are actually resident registration and land transfer papers. Sheymon says that those documents acknowledge them as official residents of his territory, and with them, they'll have the right to claim this as their land. He's going to build a town near here, and they'll be able to live there. The bandits are shaking, saying that they can't believe this and that they used to just be mere bandits. They even betrayed him at one point, and they're already grateful to him for looking out for them. But after everything they've done, there's no way they can accept this because all they have done is steal from others in order to survive. They don't feel worthy to truly live here, and although they are grateful for it, the current residents will not accept them either. Sheymon says that he's well aware, and he's not fully accepting them either. Even if they had no choice, plundering is a heavy crime. However, the fact that the Lockin family has forced them to do it is another crime he cannot forgive. Although they have stolen from others, they avoided hurting them, and he believes they still have a chance to atone for their crimes. This money is half a year's worth of payment, and from now on, they'll become mercenaries. If they have made others fear them, they need to prepare to die fighting on their behalf, as that is the true path for them to seek atonement. This is the future he can give them. However, the path they walk toward the future is up to them. That's why he'll put his trust into them as people. The bandits hold back their tears and then start to raise up their weapons, saying they will lay their lives on the front line for him and protect his territory. Han says that the bandits were considered targets for subjugation, as that has always been a rule of the Lockin family. He wonders if what he's believed up until now was the right choice. He drops to his knees, saying what he's chosen to do is to ignore the screams of the alienated. He calls himself a fool. He can't believe he misunderstood the intentions of the young lord and questioned him. Now he understands that he truly intends to improve the territory, and he promises that he'll make up for this mistake by serving by his side, and we see him starting to cry. Sheymon notices him, saying that he's finally let his guard down and he really isn't knowing how to deal with it. The bandits tell Sheymon to be careful on his way back and thank him once more as he leaves. Han sits there in admiration still. After a bit, Sheymon sighs out of relief and says that was tough, and he assumes most of the people have been taken care of now. Then he starts to reach into what's left from the bag. As we see a purple aura, he says it's time for him to start the real work back at the Demon King's castle. He says that while he might be satisfied now, the problem is cost. As we see small little golem boys handling all the chores, he says he's managed to regain trust from his people, but it costs too much. He spent the majority of the funds earned in Lamer, and he needs a better source of income. He guesses he'll have to resort to that, but, of course, in typical fashion, doesn't say what. He then looks at two of the golems, saying that he's going to need two of them to help him out, as he's holding on to the thing from the bag again. The golems shudder, and we hear them screaming out as a bright purple light can be seen from the castle. Philip starts to tell Sheymon that they've spent almost all of the pay they brought back from Lamer, and he knows it wasn't going to be enough to continue operating. Sheymon acknowledges this, saying it wasn't going to be enough to maintain the territory anyway. Philip asks what the plan is now, suggesting they might need to go on another journey. Sheymon tells him to shut up, asking if he's brought the records regarding mine development. Philip admits that there are only records of failed attempts decades ago, and although they've tried looking within their territory, there wasn't a single sign of a mine anywhere. Sheymon asks for the reason behind incurring so much debt for something with such little chance of success. Philip explains that it was actually the only option at the time. They were in a horrible state due to a few unfortunate events happening within a short period. While residents were moving away, Sheymon was unconscious. Sheymon sighs, saying that now he understands how bad the situation truly is. With the failed harvest season, maintaining the territory is impossible. However, something seems off to him, as there should still be a mine. Then he spots something and points out an area on the map, asking why there are no records for this area. Philip starts to sweat nervously, explaining that the Rocky Mountain range was too difficult to scout because of the abundance of monsters. Even though they sent their knights there a few times, the monsters hiding in every corner of the region left them no choice but to return empty-handed. Sheymon laughs, saying that means they weren't able to scout the region thoroughly. Philip starts to feel uncomfortable, hoping Sheymon doesn't have any weird plans. Sheymon grins, and of course, Philip tries to tell him that the place is too dangerous and insists on going with him if he's going. But Sheymon understands that the mines must be there and heads to the Rocky Mountain range. We see Sheymon looking up at something, saying that he thought Philip was overreacting as usual, but all he sees are monsters everywhere, even in the trees. He says it turns out Philip was actually right this time. Sheymon notes that this is odd because these monsters should all live within separate regions, wondering why they are cooperating with one another. He sighs, asking if they've adapted to deal with humans. One of the monsters rears its sword back, swinging down at Sheymon, who sidesteps it. Sheymon then jumps off the ground as all the other infantry start to collapse on him. He begins to ready his magic, saying that they must think they have the advantage. Putting his hands on the ground, he creates a magic circle, saying from now on he'll be taking care of them himself. The mobs are surprised as golems rise from the ground, roaring and ready to fight. One of the monsters walks up and hits a golem in the head, but the golem completely brushes it off and punches the monster in the gut, sending it flying. Sheymon comments that this is going to be a lot easier than he initially thought and praises the future mana stones for their capability. Some goblins from the tree start to launch at the golems, but they are absolutely manhandled. The golems are faster than expected, much to the contrast of their large size. Sheymon says that the monsters are swarming at them endlessly. He understands why the knights failed to clear the region. Dealing with all of them is difficult, but not impossible. Then Sheymon notices a special-looking monster in the back and says that it must be their leader. Sheymon crouches down into a sprinting stance, saying it's his turn to join the fun. Using his magic to strengthen himself physically, he dashes off the ground, disappearing in front of the monsters and leaving them confused. He reappears behind the leader, already in the air, saying he doesn't have much time to waste. He shoves his hand onto the monster's head, casting a spell called Obedience. The monster's eyes start to glow with a purple hue. It screams, and Sheymon explains that this magic is actually brainwashing magic. A symbol appears on the monster's head, leaving the others confused. Sheymon smirks, saying that their leader is now his subordinate. The leader readies itself to fight its own kind, and the tide quickly turns in Sheymon's favor. The remaining monsters drop to their hands and knees, lowering their weapons in surrender. Sheymon tells them that he won't hurt them if they bring their other leaders to him. We see some lightning off in the Rocky Mountain range as we see another one of their leaders being brainwashed by Sheymon as he's holding it by the throat. It appears to be a goblin. It then grips its teeth, and he lets go of it, causing it to drop to the floor. Sheymon says he has a question, and the other goblins look scared. He says that he heard there was a place where dwarves would come and go, asking if they know anything about that. The goblins, with two orc leaders behind them, sit there completely terrified. Sheymon looks at them, wondering if they aren't going to answer, but says maybe they don't actually know anything. The goblin leader, now brainwashed, starts to speak, telling him not to worry and kneeling on the ground, saying he shall guide him to that place, calling him master. Sheymon smirks, saying that at least one of them seems useful. Sometime later, he heads to a mine that has completely been caved in. Sheymon asks if this is the entrance, and the goblins say that this is correct. Sheymon says there are traces of some kind of landslide, but something is strange. He wonders what could be in there, as all of the monsters are terrified of this place way beyond reason, which makes him a little suspicious about what could be inside. Sheymon says he doesn't know what it is, but he'll figure it out once he does. He starts to imbue aura into his hand, using his dark flame spell. He explodes the rocks open, sending the debris flying, and he starts to smirk, saying he knew it, that there was a mine within their territory after all. All the monsters still look completely defeated, and he wonders what's going on with them because he doesn't sense anything. He tells them they can all head back, and one of the orc leaders looks shocked. Sheymon says, in exchange, they should never bring harm to humans again and spend their time peacefully until he gives them orders. They seem happy that he's letting them go. He tells them to stay hidden, and he's sure they'll come in handy one day. He then turns back toward the mine, saying it's time for him to get started. We get a flashback to olden times as we see some lizard people being turned into slaves. Sheymon explains that in the past, with their overwhelming techniques and force, humans had oppressed other races. We see a lizard girl crying after getting whipped, and Sheymon says they wished for only humans to be left on the continent. As such, Sheymon, who is known as the Demon King, began to burn down one kingdom after another, rescuing the enslaved races. For them, he was considered their savior as he stood up for them when nobody else would. Back at the Demon King's tower, we see him sitting on his throne as an orc kneels in front of him. Sheymon confirms with the orc that there aren't even 10 remaining survivors of his tribesmen. The orc is silent, and Sheymon tells his assistant to make a base for them in a different territory and make them do construction work. The orc then begins to cry, thanking him. Sheymon asks if there are any more people he needs to talk to, and if not, they should wrap it up. We then hear a man saying that he seems to be the last one, and he enters the room. We see it's a dwarf, who asks if it's all right to make an elderly man wait this long. The assistant asks how dare he show that attitude in front of their lord, but Sheymon tells him that it's fine. He can't believe that a dwarf, who possesses the greatest technology, would come here, and on top of that, the energy rating for him is extraordinary. He asks the dwarf who he is, saying he never dreamed he would get to meet an ancient one. The dwarf laughs, saying Sheymon seems quite perceptive, and it wouldn't be easy to tell him apart from his appearance alone. Sheymon asks why he's come here, saying he doesn't believe even humans would be a match for them. The dwarf says that humans lack technology, and they indiscriminately destroy nature. Because of them, plenty of ecosystems have been ruined. Sheymon asks if that means he's going to help him wipe them out, and the dwarf says that's right. If he cleans them up, then they can use their technology to improve his base. Sheymon says that he too is a human, though, asking if he still plans to help him. The dwarf starts to laugh loudly right in front of Sheymon for saying that. He asks him what he's talking about, saying he is clearly the Demon King. Sheymon starts to smirk. Back to the present, Sheymon now has a torch, exploring the mine shaft, seeing that the dwarf mentioned there was a huge mine here. It looks like he was right. He thought that it would be a lot harder to fix up, but it seems as if it's going to be pretty easy. The dwarf's abilities really are unmatched, as it's so well kept on the inside. With the amount of ores here, as long as he has people willing to work as miners, they will have no worries from now on. He's then surprised by something, saying that it's odd that the construction ends here as we see it boarded up. He turns, looking around, saying after he died, he heard that the place had been occupied by humans. He wonders if it's because of that, but despite people having worked here, there are plenty of valuables scattered around. And no matter how rushed they were, would the dwarves that dearly cherish their tools have made this kind of mistake? He starts to have a weird feeling in his stomach, saying that something is off. The ground starts to shake, and he turns, only to catch the glimpse of something red dashing past him as it's burrowing in and out of the ground repeatedly. Sheymon drops his torch out of surprise, looking up, saying now he finally gets why the monsters were terrified of this place. A shadow looms over him, and we see a giant worm screeching at him. He says it's definitely the master of the mine, and that it's due to this guy that the mine was abandoned. He apologizes, but it's bothering him, and it's time for it to get out as he starts to get ready to cast some spells. Sheymon then immediately summons two golems to help him fight off against the worm. They start to have a WWE stare down, and the worm lets out a screech, alerting them that they are in its territory. Then Sheymon stretches his hand outward, telling them to go ahead and take it down as they start charging directly at the worm. But the worm is insanely fast as it jumps in like a bullet, forcing the two golems to do their best to block it. The golems then begin to get pushed back, but they start digging into the ground, and they manage to actually stop it right before it hits Sheymon. Sheymon starts to glare at it, and then tells the golems to hold it down as he leaps into the air, imbuing aura into his hand, preparing yet another dark flame spell. He shoots it out, and it explodes on the worm. He says this should be enough to calm it down, but then is surprised by something, because he knows that his magic is weak at the moment. But what the hell is it made out of for his attack to not even leave a scratch? The golems also wonder what's going on as they all get launched into the air as the worm leaps towards Sheymon. It opens its mouth, going to eat him, but one of the golem brothers latches onto it and imbues aura into its hand, punching the worm back down into the ground before it can eat Sheymon. Sheymon tells the golem it did good, and the golem is really happy about it. But the worm looks up completely pissed. Sheymon realizes this is bad and tells the golem to watch out. Instead of going for Sheymon, the worm leaps straight towards the golem, taking it straight into the ground. The golem lets out a roar, and some minerals begin to fall from where he was dropped into. Sheymon asks how this is possible as the worm starts eating the minerals, and its skin begins to change to reflect that as it starts to evolve. Sheymon says this is hella bad, because if it's just going to continuously evolve, it's going to make things way harder for him. Sometime later, Sheymon asks where this thing even came from, because no matter what he does, this thing doesn't take any damage. He has no other choice, and if he wants to defeat it, he needs to bring his gigant here and deal with it that way. The worm then throws a rock at the exit, completely blocking it, and Sheymon starts to get pissed, saying he can't believe it's intelligent as well. The worm lets out a screech, going in for another attack, and Sheymon says it's way tougher than he actually expected. Then he starts to think about it, saying if a monster of this size was wandering about outside, it should have left marks around the forest. Wondering if he ever saw anything hinting at that, he says that it might only live in the mine, and if that's the case, there's no point in bringing the gigant here, as it will be unable to fit into the mines to begin with. This makes things even more complicated, and if only he knew its weakness, then he wouldn't have to struggle. He then senses something as we see the golems holding onto it, low-key rodeoing this thing. Sheymon says that the flow of mana was disturbed just now, and that must be it. He tells the golems to buy him some time as he starts running away, because if he's correct, there has to be something nearby he can use. He starts looking around the mine shaft, wondering where it is, and then finally spots it in the corner. He says that this is a necessity for dwarves when mining, and it's an ancient pickaxe. He says with this, he's going to have a chance as he uses his physical strengthening magic. He readies himself, and then starts running up on the back of the worm, Shadow of the Colossus style, and raises the pickaxe into the air, saying with this he'll be able to mine anything. He swings it down straight into the forehead of the worm. Sheymon is confused because all he did is piss it off, and he wonders if maybe he didn't put enough force into it. He then loses his grip and falls off the back of the worm, and it looks like it's going to land on him. Back at the mansion, we hear Rogers asking Philip if he was aware that the young lord disappears every night. Philip says there have been times when he would disappear without warning, and Rogers calls him an idiot, asking if his escort knight is unaware of his whereabouts. Philip starts to cry, saying every time he tried to follow him, he kept managing to disappear from his sight. Dixon says he's actually heard people say he visits the Demon King's castle, and Roger sighs, saying he didn't think twice about it since he was unaware of the situation, but now that he heard about it, he understands why Hans is so worried. Hans then speaks up, saying he's not worried anymore, and Rogers is surprised and turns around. Hans says that he has decided to fully trust the young lord. Even at this moment, he believes that he is doing his utmost for the sake of the people, when in reality, Bro is just stuck in a slugfest with the worm. He starts to ready another spell, saying it might not have worked before, but now there's damage on the worm, so it might have a shot. He shoots off a giant dark flame this time, and it starts to go straight towards the worm, exploding on its head. The golems catch him, and Sheymon says that this is seriously a problem, and he doesn't think he can handle another one of these worms, so hopefully that was the last of them. Sometime later, after the fight, he says that thanks to the worm, it looks like he's going to be able to save on manpower, as we see the golems mining the ore off of its head. I don't know if it's dead or not. Sheymon then looks to his side, spotting a skeleton as it's none other than a dwarf who is dripped out in some artifacts and his armor behind him. Sheymon says that it looks like he tried to protect this place, and that he can respect that. He gives him a proper burial, saying that he hopes this is good enough, as now he has a place to rest and leave all of his burdens to be at peace. He hopes he understands that even if he takes all of his stuff, it doesn't mean he bears any ill intentions. After returning from his expedition to the Rocky Mountains, Roger gathered with the group in the meeting room to share exciting news. Among the attendees was Dixon, the accountant, who couldn't contain his shock when Roger revealed he found a mine. Roger confirmed the discovery with a chuckle. Yes, we checked it out, and it's overflowing with ores. The best part? No signs of monsters. The group collectively breathed a sigh of relief, especially Dixon, who remarked, "That's truly good news. We've finally solved the financial issues of the territory." Mute, always focused on practicality, added, "Then I can focus on preparing the tools needed to mine properly." Hans, who had been reviewing the report, had a different perspective. That might not even be necessary. The mine appears to be in excellent condition. Someone's already worked on it. With proper manpower, we could see significant returns without much setup. Sitting slightly apart from the group, Sheymon watched their discussion unfold, a faint smile on his face. Their optimism and energy were infectious, warming him. Reflecting on the stability they'd achieved, he thought to himself, "Looks like the territory's foundations are finally stable. Just in case, I force the monsters to migrate deeper into the mountains. If the territory faces a crisis, they could even serve as an emergency military force." Lost in his musings, Sheymon was jolted back to the present when Hans approached him respectfully. "Young lord," Hans called. "Yes," Sheymon replied, meeting his gaze. Hans spoke honestly. "This is all thanks to you, young lord." Sheymon, ever humble, dismissed the compliment. "It's nothing. It's because of everyone's hard work. I merely tied up the loose ends." Despite his modesty, the group expressed their gratitude. Sheymon, however, tempered their enthusiasm with a reminder. "But if you don't want things to return to the way they were, don't let your guard down. Lose focus for a moment, and it could all come crashing down." Then, without missing a beat, Sheymon added, "Anyway, I have a request." Hans said, "Yes, of course." "What is it?" Sheymon asked. "Could I leave the fiefdom in your hands for a while?" The room fell silent. The group exchanged puzzled and concerned glances until Hans broke the silence. Where do you plan to go? Sheymon offered a brief, enigmatic reply. Ask Philip for the details. Philip, always eager to share news, grinned broadly. The young lord has decided to purchase a gigant. And who better than me to ensure he gets the best one? I'll personally escort him. Before Philip could finish his sentence, Roger playfully knocked him off his chair with a solid punch. Don't worry, everyone. To ensure there are no issues, I'll accompany the young lord myself. Mute, not one to be left out when it came to gigants, stood up decisively. If it involves gigants, then the Iron Mage will handle it. Dixon, ever mindful of finances, quickly followed. This involves finances, so I must go as well. From his undignified position on the floor, Philip groaned. Aren't you all being too mean to me? His complaint fell on deaf ears as the group continued their discussion, focused on their next steps. As the group journeyed by cart, Roger took charge of the reins, leaving Sheymon and Philip seated inside. The ride was relatively quiet, save for Philip's unusually cheerful mood, which caught Sheymond's attention. You seem happy, Sheymon observed, breaking the silence. Philip beamed, his enthusiasm evident. Of course, I'll finally get the gigant of my dreams. Sheymon frowned, his practical nature surfacing. We already have gigants in our territory. Philip dismissed the comment with a scoff. What a dull thing to say. New models are leagues ahead of that junk. A true rider deserves the best. Up front, Roger overheard the conversation and let out an exasperated sigh. Cut the chatter and spare us your gigant philosophy. Don't even dream of fancy nonsense while I'm around. Philip, feigning hurt, protested loudly. Why are you so mean to me? Roger didn't hesitate to respond. If you weren't an escort knight, I'd have you driving the cart. Philip leaned back with a dramatic sigh. Uncle, you're cruel. Sheymon, watching the banter unfold, couldn't help but smirk. Bringing Roger along was proving to be a smart decision. He was perfect for keeping Philip's boundless energy and flamboyant ideas in check. As the cart continued along the road, a large vehicle approached from the opposite direction, stopping abruptly. Roger immediately grew alert, narrowing his eyes. A trailer appeared out of nowhere. I'm sorry, young lord. Intrigued, Sheymon stepped out of the carriage to get a closer look. A trailer? This is my first time seeing one. Roger pointed to the imposing vehicle. It's a large cart made with magic engineering. It's expensive but far sturdier than a regular cart. It's mainly used for transporting heavy cargo. Sheymon examined the trailer thoughtfully, its impressive build sparking an idea that looks useful. Should he buy one? Before they could leave, a man emerged from the trailer, breaking the silence. Apologies, you seem surprised. Maybe their first time seeing a trailer? Roger turned to the man, his tone sharp and guarded. Who are you people? The man smiled disarmingly. We're peddlers from the Shade Company, traveling the countryside selling regional goods. Sheymon raised an eyebrow, skepticism in his voice. Shade Company? I've never heard of you. The man laughed, his demeanor casual. We're new, but mark my words, we'll be the best in no time. Sheymon shrugged, seemingly uninterested. The man's gaze lingered on Sheymon, his expression turning curious. By any chance, are you the lord of a family? Sheemon's expression instantly darkened, his voice cold. Why do you ask? The man raised his hands in mock surrender, chuckling nervously. No offense meant. Peddlers like us seek goodwill with lords. It's just good business. Sheymon dismissed him curtly, saying I'm no lord worth your interest. Now, if you'll excuse us. With that, Sheymon and his group resumed their journey, leaving the peddler behind. As the carriage faded into the distance, the man turned to his guards, a sly grin spreading across his face. Teisel. He introduced himself, the name carrying a sinister weight. Holding up a worn poster, he sneered. That's him, the young lord of the Locken family. I didn't expect to find him here. This job just got easier. The poster in his hand displayed crossed-out pictures of young lords from various families. Only Sheemon's image remained unmarked, a chilling testament to the man's true intentions. That night, as the group rested around a crackling campfire, Philip broke the uneasy silence. Those peddlers didn't seem like merchants, he remarked. Roger nodded, sharing his doubts. No way an up-and-coming trader could afford a trailer like that. And that Teisel guy? He's shady. His men didn't look like merchants either. Sheymon remained silent, his sharp mind turning over details from earlier. That trailer carried something emitting a faint mana flow, he mused. It was well hidden, but I recognized it. Before he could finish his thought, the sound of footsteps broke through the night. Philip shot to his feet, drawing his sword in a flash. Who's there? A familiar voice answered as a figure stepped into the firelight. "Good evening, sirs. Fate seems to have brought us together again," Teisel said, his grin unsettling. Sheamon's eyes narrowed as he studied the man. "You were heading in the opposite direction earlier. Why are you here now?" Teisel shrugged nonchalantly, his smirk unwavering. "Unfinished business brought us back this way. When I saw your fire, I thought I'd join you. If you don't mind, that is." Sheamon's gaze flickered to the surrounding darkness. He gestured calmly toward the shadows beyond the campfire. "Join us? Are you sure there's room for all of you?" Teisel laughed, his tone tinged with amusement and menace. "You catch on quick, young lord. I underestimated you. But a job is a job." His grin widened into something far more sinister as his voice dropped. "I have no personal grudge. Please die here." With Teisel's subordinates rushing forward and attacking, but Sheamon's knights, Roger and Philip, successfully blocked their advance and fend off the assault. Teisel then orders his subordinates to kill everyone, with particular emphasis on the young blonde lord, Sheymon, and to ensure his death. Roger, aware of the danger, instructs Philip to protect Sheymon, which Philip agrees to do, moving quickly to intercept an enemy's attack. Philip stands firm and commands Sheymon to get behind him, swearing to protect him with their lives. Sheymon follows, but as he steps behind Philip, he reflects on the situation, realizing the scale of the attack is far beyond what one would expect for an assassination. The enemies are highly skilled, holding their own against both Philip and Roger. Sheymon is concerned that if this becomes a prolonged battle, they will be at a disadvantage. As Sheymon contemplates, an assassin sneaks up behind him. However, Roger quickly intervenes, countering the attack and pushing the assassin back. The assassin regains his balance, but Roger checks on Sheymon, asking if he's all right. Sheymon thanks Roger, but internally he realizes that these are no ordinary assassins or bandits. The fact that they can get past Roger indicates that each one is a highly trained knight. At that moment, Teisel taunts them, signaling his subordinates, and unexpectedly, a gigant, an enormous mechanical being, arrives on the scene, startling Sheymon and his knights. Sheymon recognizes the energy he had sensed earlier and realizes that it was the presence of the gigant. In a moment of urgency, Sheymon orders Roger and Philip to close their eyes to protect them from the impending danger. Both knights comply, closing their eyes just in time. Sheymon begins chanting a spell. "O sun, awaken from silence and shine your light in the darkness," and casts a flash of light powerful enough to temporarily blind the assassins. This creates an opening for them to escape. Seeing the opportunity, Sheymon orders his knights to run. Roger and Philip quickly agree and follow Sheymon, fleeing the scene in haste. Seeing that Teisel, half-blinded from Sheemon's flash spell, angrily orders his subordinates to chase after them. One of his subordinates, struggling with the blinding effect, complains that they can't see. Teisel snaps at them to pull themselves together and continues to berate them, frustrated that they weren't prepared for Sheemon's unexpected use of magic. As his subordinates mutter about their lack of preparation, Teisel grows more agitated and vows to catch Sheymon, promising a painful death for him. Meanwhile, Sheymon, Philip, and Roger continue running through the forest to escape their pursuers. Roger praises Sheymon for his quick thinking, saying the plan to use magic saved them from a dangerous situation. Philip also commends Sheemon's abilities, stating that he's sure Sheymon will become a powerful rune knight in the future. Sheymon, still focused on escaping, chastises them for talking when they should be running faster, warning that their enemies won't give up so easily, especially with a gigant involved. Sheymon reflects that camping in the woods may have been a good decision since it's too dark for their pursuers to track them, and they need to get as much distance as possible. However, to their surprise, the assassins catch up with them. The assassins shout to each other to stop Sheemon's group, and both sides prepare for battle, swords drawn. Sheymon is shocked at how quickly they've caught up, realizing everything is going wrong. Roger urges Sheymon to keep running, while Philip notes that the enemy force is smaller now, with fewer opponents than before. Sheymon, assessing the situation, asks Philip and Roger if they'll be all right since the remaining assassins appear to be quite skilled. Philip reassures him that they didn't display their true skills before and are capable of handling the situation. Roger adds that it will be hard for them to fight at their best if Sheymon stays with them. Understanding their point, Sheymon decides to leave the battle to them and continues running to further distance himself from the attackers. Philip, determined to protect Sheymon, swiftly summoned his mana blade and confronted the remaining assassins. Declaring, "Things are different this time," he unleashed his phantom sword technique, swiftly killing the first assassin in front of him. He further stated, "From now on, I'll show you my true abilities. Roger, equally furious, stepped forward and shouted, "How dare you try to harm the young lord?" With his own powerful technique, he quickly cut down several enemies, delivering a harsh warning. Don't bother begging for mercy. The remaining assassins, witnessing their comrades fall, grew visibly nervous. Philip, taunting the assassins, said, "Hey, you self-proclaimed merchants. If you dare to point your blades at the warrior clan of Locken, then you must be ready to pay the price for it." Meanwhile, in Lamer, chaos reigned as houses were engulfed in flames, with residents desperately trying to extinguish them. Princess Reina stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sight of the fire. Her butler, Victor, urgently warned her, "Princess, this is no ordinary fire. It's like they poured oil on it. It's extremely dangerous. Please get away from here." Reina, in tears, refused to leave, saying, I can't abandon the citizens and run away." Nearby citizens, also fighting the flames, called out to her, "We'll be fine. The people will survive if you do, princess. Please get to safety." With no other choice, Victor grabbed Reina's hand and began pulling her away from the scene, insisting, "You must run, even if it's only for the people's sake." Reluctantly, Reina followed, glancing back at the burning town as they fled. After the fire eventually burned itself out, the residents returned to the wreckage, heartbroken. A little girl mourned over her father's charred body, and a woman cried out for help, frantic that her daughter was trapped inside one of the burned homes. Reina, devastated by the loss, could only cry, "I'm so sorry." At that moment, Count Monike appeared with his knights and smugly greeted Reina. "It's been a while, Princess Reina." He casually added, "I just happened to be training in the area. Wouldn't you say this is fate?" Reina, shocked by his coldness, asked, "You were training at this hour?" Monike coolly replied, "I've been training my soldiers' discipline recently. That's why we've been training at night, to ensure the safety of the people throughout the night." Victor, furious at Manak's blatant disregard for the suffering, shouted, How dare you speak such lies?" Before he could continue, Manak's knights drew their blades and aimed them at him, silencing him. Leaning closer to Reina, Monike sneered, "Princess Reina, I told you before. The one causing the most suffering to these people is you." He then turned to leave, laughing, "Swallow your despair as you regret your actions, princess." Reina stood there, shaking with anger and guilt, her fists clenched tightly. As tears streamed down her face, she vowed to herself, "Count Monike, I will never, never forgive you." The scene shifts back to Sheymon, who had been running for some time, catching his breath and analyzing the situation. He thought there was no sign of further pursuit, and it seemed Rogers and Philip were managing the enemy on their end. Despite this, Sheymon remained uncertain about who was behind the enemy's forces, especially considering they had the ability to mobilize a gigant. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, he concluded he might need to return to his territory and prepare for war. As Sheymon emerged from the dense forest, his path was suddenly blocked. Standing before him were Teisel and his men, accompanied by two gigants. The sight stopped Sheymon in his tracks. Teisel spoke first, his tone full of disdain. "It seems you've been underestimating us too much. I must admit, though, I underestimated the young lord. Should we call it even? Who would have guessed the heir of a hero's family would resort to such petty magic?" Sheymon, unfazed, retorted, "Did my magic not suit your taste? Even if you don't like it, going this far to capture a mere child seems a bit excessive, don't you think?" Teisel, indifferent, shrugged and replied, "Who knows? Even a lion gives it their all when hunting a rabbit." Sheamon's reaction to this comment was laughter, which left Teisel visibly confused. Sheamon's demeanor shifted as he calmly addressed Teisel. "You've separated me from my knights and think you've cornered me, don't you?" Teisel, still trying to gauge Sheamon's mindset, asked, "Have you given up? Or have you lost your mind? If you're trying to buy time, it's pointless." Sheymon smirked confidently and replied, "The moment you witness my power, you'll realize not a single one of you will survive." He began casting a dimension spell, and a large magic circle appeared behind him. From the circle, golems started to emerge, one after another, visibly alarming Teisel and his men. As the golems roared, Teisel's subordinates shrank back in fear, clearly intimidated by the sudden surge of summoned creatures. Sheymon, with a smirk, commented, "The one frustrated by not being able to unleash his full power was actually me." His golems continued to form, and their roar only added to the growing tension, leaving Teisel's men unsettled by the overwhelming presence of the summoned creatures. Taizel's subordinate, seeing the overwhelming presence of the golems, exclaiming in disbelief, "Where did all these golems come from? Summoning even one is difficult. So how could he summon so many?" Taizel, who understood the danger but remained composed, thought of his next move. He issued a calm but firm order to his men. "Golems may have once been a threat, but they're just piles of rocks. We have the gigant. Even dozens of golems won't stand a chance against it. Whoever brings me the young lord's head will be promoted to Knight Commander. Show your skills." Encouraged by Taizel's words, his subordinates' resolve hardened. They responded with determination. "Knight Commander, you say? Sir Taizel, we'll make sure to fulfill that promise." With that, they rushed forward to attack. Some of them yelled to one another in competitive zeal, saying that one's head is mine. Sheymon, observing their approach, couldn't help but think simple and brutish. Dismissing my immortal army as mere piles of rocks. We'll see how they fare after 500 years. Shall I give them a history lesson? He cast a spell named Marionette to take control of the golems. In response, the golems immediately surrounded Taizel and his men from all sides. Taizel's subordinates, startled by the unexpected speed of the golems, gasped in shock, were surrounded in an instant. Their fear was evident, but Taizel barked at them. "You idiots! They're just golems. Why are you panicking?" Sheymon, sensing their underestimation, warned them. "If you keep underestimating them, you'll regret it in the afterlife." Then, with a swift motion, Sheymon raised his left hand into the air. The golems mirrored his action, raising their left hands simultaneously before slamming them down onto the ground. This synchronized attack puzzled Taizel's men, who whispered in confusion. Why did the golems hit the ground? Could it be that he is not controlling them properly? Sheymon's voice cut through the uncertainty. "This body has fought in hundreds of wars. Let me give you a piece of advice. Understanding the terrain is the foundation of strategy." Taizel, now realizing the golems' deliberate targeting of the ground. Before Taizel could fully process the implications, the ground beneath them began to crack open. Panic erupted as Taizel's men screamed. "The ground is collapsing. Everyone retreat." It was too late. Sheymon smirked and delivered his judgment. "I warned you. Arrogance born from relying only on numbers and the gigant. This is your downfall. Reflect on it in the afterlife." With that, the golems struck the earth with devastating force, causing the ground to crumble entirely. Taizel and his men fell into the newly formed crevasse. Sheymon, watching the collapse, murmured, "It's settled? What a shame. I should have captured a few to learn who's behind this." Just then, a sword aura attack struck Sheymon, injuring him. He turned his attention to the source of the attack and saw that it was Taizel, still alive. To his surprise, Taizel was perched atop a gigant that clung to the side of the crevasse wall, visibly furious. Taizel growled, "Damn bastard. How dare you destroy my knights? I'll never forgive you." Sheymon chuckled darkly, his eyes narrowing. "This might actually work out better. I'll capture you and make you confess everything." Taizel sneered, his tone laced with venom. "Try it if you can. I won't let you die easily until you beg me to kill you. I'll make you suffer." Without hesitation, he charged at Sheymon, dagger in hand. As Taizel closed the distance, Sheymon attempted to cast a spell, but his mana spiraled uncontrollably. The golems he had summoned began to crumble, and a sharp pain coursed through his chest. Sheymon groaned, thinking, "My heart feels like it's going to burst." This damned curse. Taizel, now inches away, taunted him further. "Looks like your mana's run dry. This is the end. You'll beg me to kill you. I'll crush you alive." Gritting his teeth, Sheymon hissed, "How noisy. Do you really think a curse of this level would stop me?" With renewed determination, he cast another spell. Dark hands erupted from the ground, reaching out toward Taizel with unsettling speed. Taizel's confidence wavered as his eyes widened in shock. What the hell? Is this black magic? He could hardly believe it. A descendant of heroes wielding such forbidden power. Sheymon's voice turned cold. "Before my patience runs out, you'd better tell me who your master is. Answer me." As the dark hands closed in, Taizel cried out in agony, unable to withstand the pressure. Realizing his defeat, he screamed, "I'll talk. It's Count Monike." Everything was under his orders. Sheymon's gaze darkened. "Count Monike?" From the arena, Taizel, desperate and trembling, begged, "That's all I know. Please have mercy." Without a trace of hesitation, Sheymon's voice turned colder. "Mercy, you say?" He ended Taizel's life swiftly, muttering, "I've never once forgiven my enemies." With Taizel's death, a surge of power flowed into Sheymon, mending his injuries. Though physically healed, Sheymon grimaced at the sensation. Whether demons or humans, absorbing power never feels great. His thoughts drifted to Count Manhwa. This plan of his from lamer, too meticulous. Deploying knights, assassins, and even a gigant? To move such a large force so discreetly. Is there another reason they targeted the Locken family? His expression hardened. Count Manhwa, whatever it is, the price for crossing me will be paid in full. They'll regret it deeply. Suddenly, Sheymon heard rustling from the bushes. Turning swiftly, he spotted his escort knights, Philip and Rogers, emerging. Both looked relieved to find him unharmed. Philip was the first to speak. "You're safe. We were worried." Sheymon's tone softened slightly. "You arrived quicker than I expected." Philip replied with a grin. "Of course. What did you expect?" Sheymon didn't linger on the pleasantries and urged them forward. "Let's go quickly. We've already wasted too much time." As they moved, he informed the knights of Count Manhwa's involvement in the attack. Rogers furrowed his brow. So it was Count Manhwa behind all of this. Sheymon nodded but added cautiously, "I can't be certain yet, but we can't take any chances. Either way, it's best to avoid returning to lamer territory." Rogers, ever the strategist, suggested, "Young lord, you should return to the territory and strengthen the troops. We can't guarantee something like this won't happen again." Sheymon looked at him in confusion. Rogers explained further, "There's no guarantee this won't happen again. We can't afford to be complacent. We need to prepare for the worst." Sheymon, evaluating their position, confidently stated, "After sustaining this much damage, the enemy won't make a move anytime soon. This is the perfect opportunity to secure a gigant." Rogers responded with a practical concern. "There's a place nearby that sells gigants, but without a carriage, we won't be able to get there." Sheymon smirked and gestured toward the trailer left by their attackers. "Who says we don't have a carriage?" They conveniently brought one with them. As they boarded the trailer, Philip chuckled, "What a twist of fate. We didn't plan this, but we ended up with a free trailer." Rogers, clearly displeased, snapped at Philip, "Stop with the carefree attitude. Have you already forgotten what just happened? From now on, we're doubling your training. The young lord's safety is paramount." Philip, attempting to lighten the mood, said, "Uncle, relax. Everything ended without a major incident, and the young lord is safe." The ground collapsing and taking out all the enemies at the critical moment. It must have been the blessing of our ancestors. Sheymon, unimpressed, gave Philip a bewildered look and sighed. "Blessing? Don't be ridiculous." Internally, he thought, "I nearly died, and my revenge would have been left incomplete. All because of this damned curse. The ripple I felt when I tried to use black magic. That power stopped the black circle in my heart. It was definitely the ripple of a curse. Although I've regained some ability to counter it, the current circle isn't strong enough. Who in the world could have placed such a powerful curse on me?" While Sheymon grappled with his thoughts, events unfolded elsewhere in the capital's main branch. Darren, a trembling figure, knelt before a masked individual seated on a throne. The masked figure spoke in a chilling tone. "Are you the one called Darren?" Darren, visibly shaking and drenched in sweat, stammered, "Why yes, that's me. But why have you summoned me?" The figure replied, "As the intermediary, I'm here to act on last year's directive from the guildmaster. Do you remember the order to secure Demon King Sheymon's stronghold?" Darren nodded nervously. "Our guild was close to succeeding, but someone interfered." The masked figure leaned forward, removing their mask. "Interference? How intriguing. Do you know who it was?" When the mask was removed, Darren's face turned ashen with terror. The figure was revealed to be undead, their lifeless yet menacing presence sending a wave of fear through him. Desperate, Darren begged, "Please spare me. I swear, this time I'll succeed." The undead being stepped closer, their voice eerily calm. "Who said I was going to kill you? I'm merely curious. Tell me, who is the one disrupting the plan?" Sheymon arrives in the city of Magic Towers, Brendan, which is bustling and much busier than the city of Lamber. Romer, explaining the city's significance, reveals that Brendan is famous for its many magic towers, which bring magicians, merchants, and technicians together. These elements have helped the city's growth, making it a prime location for purchasing gigants, ranging from warrior class to hero class. Some workshops even produce dozens of units every month, sparking Sheymon's interest. Philip adds that Brendan is home to a branch of the renowned Veritas Magic Tower, which has built a solid foundation in gigant production. Sheymon reflects on his past with the Veritas Magic Tower, remembering the elder and duke who were responsible for his lover's death. He thinks that despite the unpleasantness of dealing with them, he can use this opportunity to evaluate the quality of their gigants and potentially improve on them by breaking them down and identifying their strengths and weaknesses. At the gate of the Veritas Magic Tower, a guard stops them, saying only those with Baron status or higher are allowed entry. When Sheymon objects, Philip identifies him as Luke, heir to the Locken barony, prompting the guard to mock the family, claiming they are too poor to afford a gigant. This insult angers Rogers and Philip, and both draw their swords in anger. However, Sheymon calmly stops them, choosing to ignore the guard. He reflects on how, despite the passage of time, the Veritas Magic Tower still maintains its arrogance. Despite this, he's impressed by the scale of the tower, noting that the gigants produced here must be of impressive quality. Sheymon expresses his frustration with the guard's attitude, declaring that there is no value in spending money at a place that shows such poor manners. As they leave, Rogers, feeling ashamed, apologizes for the encounter, but Sheymon reassures him, recognizing that the gatekeeper's behavior likely reflects the attitude within the tower. He suggests that they move on and explore another magic tower instead, with Rogers agreeing to guide him to other options. Sheymon, while temporarily putting aside his desire for revenge on the Veritas Magic Tower, focuses on his primary goal of acquiring a gigant. He resolves to take revenge later, after completing his mission. They soon arrive at the modern Magic Tower in Brendan. Sheymon is immediately impressed by the tower's appearance, remarking that it seems worth exploring. Rogers explains that it's one of the top 10 magic towers, known for unmatched production speed. Inside, they observe various gigant models being created. Sheymon notes that if the quality of these models is as good as it looks, the gigants should be of excellent craftsmanship. They are then approached by Garrett, the general manager of the modern magic tower. He asks if they are searching for a specific type of gigant. Sheymon mentions his interest in a model priced around 30,000 pesos and inquires if Garrett has any suggestions. Garrett enthusiastically offers a detailed catalog of their gigants, highlighting options focused on power, defense, and more. Sheymon is impressed with the thoroughness of the presentation and the exceptional customer service. Unlike the Veritas Magic Tower, where people are judged by their status or appearance, this tower seems genuinely attentive to their customers. Sheymon considers making a purchase here, provided the performance aligns with his standards. However, the atmosphere shifts when a customer shouts, demanding a repair for a gigant. Garrett tries to calm the situation, explaining it's not a defect, but something else. But the customer interrupts, accusing the gigant of having a serious durability issue as it crumples on impact. Sheymon, uninterested in further delays, decides it's time to move on. They continue to explore other magic towers in the city, but fail to find a gigant that meets Sheymon's expectations. Eventually, Sheymon expresses his frustration, stating that while the city is reputed to specialize in gigant production, the reality is chaotic and unsatisfactory. Philip concurs with Sheymon's assessment, agreeing that the situation is disappointing. Rogers adds that during the Empire's strict regulation period, only top-tier gigants were produced, but now, with fewer controls, the quality has plummeted, and money seems to be the only requirement. Sheymon and his group are walking through the streets of Brendan when they encounter a young man in his 20s, standing with blueprints for a gigant. The boy is fervently trying to attract attention from passersby, proclaiming, "This is a truly innovative gigant. Please, just take a look." However, one person dismisses him without even looking at the blueprints, shoving him aside and telling him to stop begging and leave. Philip, witnessing the interaction, sighs and comments, walking around begging with blueprints in hand. It's no wonder the quality of gigants has declined so much. Intrigued by the boy's persistence, Sheymon approaches him. He picks up the blueprint from the ground and examines it. "This design is quite interesting," Sheymon remarks. "It's based on golem theory. It might be considered old-fashioned, but it's not bad." As Sheymon studies the blueprint, he reflects, "Is this because of Mute's teachings? Now I can truly appreciate gigants." He then asks the boy, "Tell me, how much investment do you need?" The boy, taken aback, asks, "Investment? Are you serious?" He hesitates before answering. "To finish the project, I'll need about 10,000 pesos." Seeing the boy's surprise and joy, Sheymon is reminded of his own past struggles. Sheymon agrees to the investment and says, "Take me to your lab." The boy leads them to his magic tower, an old and dilapidated building. Rogers, observing the tower, remarks, "Since you mentioned lacking money, I assumed you'd also lack space and equipment for gigant production. But it seems I was wrong. You have your own magic tower, though it looks like it might collapse." The boy laughs and explains, "The previous gigant model sold well enough to keep this place running. But the new model cost too much time and money to make. That's why most of the team left, and only a few of us remain. Sheymon and his knights exchange skeptical looks, questioning whether the boy is truly trustworthy or just another scam artist. Inside the tower, the boy urges them to take their time and look around. When Sheymon sees the new gigant model, he comments, "This is Sting, isn't it?" The boy, surprised, asks, "Do you know about Sting?" Sheymon acknowledges that he's seen it before and recalls how impressive the magic implementation was, thinking to himself, "This guy has some real skill." The boy grins and clarifies, "The exterior might look similar, but this is a completely different machine. It's Sting too. We've applied all the latest technology from our Hallis Magic Tower and redesigned the internal performance." Sheymon, intrigued, asks, "How long will it take to complete?" The boy replies, "The major work is done. Only the fine-tuning remains. It should take 1 or 2 months." Sheymon, eager to expedite the process, presses, "Will it really take that long?" The boy apologizes, explaining that precision work requires extra caution, and their limited staff is slowing things down. Sheymon, wanting to accelerate the timeline, offers an additional 20,000 pesos to hire more technicians and complete the work within a week. The boy, visibly excited by the offer, rushes off to gather the necessary staff, promising to return shortly. He hurriedly enters another room of the tower where the magic engineers, bored and exhausted, are sprawled out on the dining table, asleep. He announces that they can return to their work and promises them generous pay in exchange. The engineers, curious, inquire whether this includes better wages and improved efficiency. Shortly after, he brings them to the Gigant project, where one of the engineers explains that progress had stalled at around 67.3% because the magic core needed recalibration. However, with the proposal of night allowances, they can implement 24-hour work shifts, and the necessary optimizations are complete. The engineers eagerly begin their work on the Gigant. Philip, watching the engineers prepare to resume, expresses concern, asking Sheymon if he is truly sure about entrusting the Gigant to them. Sheymon reassures him, acknowledging the nature of research-focused magicians, and expresses confidence that the work will help elevate the Magic Tower to one of the top 10 in the world. Later that night, while everyone else is asleep, Sheymon is not in his room. Instead, he sits on the rooftop of a nearby house, looking out over the Veritas Magic Tower. With a sense of satisfaction, he reflects on how he has achieved his goals, and now, it is time to begin his revenge. Meanwhile, the Veritas Magic Tower's guards are on duty when Sheymon causes the nearby bushes to rustle, drawing their attention. The guards approach and call out, "Who's there?" but find nothing when they check the bushes. Seizing the opportunity, Sheymon sneaks past them and enters the tower, his thoughts focused on the consequences awaiting those inside. As he moves forward, he contemplates what kind of price he will make them pay for their actions. We got plenty more where that came from. Hit the subscribe button and stay tuned for even more amazing content.